They say an alpha never begs, but when Queen Selene Vareth walked out of Blackthorn Citadel without a word, King Darius Varen learned something the battlefield never taught him. You can conquer kingdoms and still lose the only war that matters. Tonight, we're diving into a tale of power, betrayal, and the brutal truth that some bonds can't be commanded. Stick around until the end, because this story doesn't go where you think it does. And when you see how this queen dismantles an empire with nothing but her silence, drop a like and comment your city below so I know my pack is watching. Night falls over Blackthorn Citadel like a predator settling onto wounded prey. Selene Vareth moves through the eastern corridor, carrying a leather satchel of moonroot remedies, her healer's instinct cataloging every shadow, every flicker of torchlight against obsidian walls. The palace smells of winter smoke and expensive wine, the kind of scent that clings to power and refuses to wash away. Her boots make no sound against marble floors. After 11 years as queen, she has learned to walk these halls the way surgeons approach flesh, with precision, without waste, leaving no trace of passage. She is 40 paces from the council chamber when she hears the laughter. Not the kind that fills banquet halls or echoes through training yards. This laughter is softer, more intimate, the sound of a secret being shared between two people who believe themselves alone. Selene slows. The council chamber door stands half open, gold light bleeding into the corridor. She should keep walking. Elder Sorella is waiting for the medicine, her joints swollen with winter pain that only Moonroot can touch. But something in that laughter makes Selene's fingers tighten around the satchel strap. She stops 3 feet from the doorway. Darius's voice cuts through the silence like a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. She will stay. She always does. 5 words, delivered with the casual certainty of a man who has never questioned his own authority. Selene does not move, does not breathe, does not allow even a single muscle to betray the fissure opening inside her chest. The woman with Darius laughs again, a sound like silk dragged across stone. Selene recognizes the voice, Lady Morgana Krell, daughter of the Northern Trade Alliance, a woman who wears ambition the way other women wear perfume. Your maid is loyal, Morgana says. That must be comforting. Darius responds with something Selene cannot hear, his voice dropping too low for clarity. But she hears enough. The tone, the ease, the absolute absence of guilt. Selene's father once told her that truth arrives in moments, not arguments. You don't build toward understanding, he said. You stumble into it fully formed, like walking through a doorway and discovering the room on the other side was always there, just waiting for you to notice. This is that doorway. She stands there for another 10 seconds, her healer's mind already cataloging symptoms the way it always does when confronting damage. Elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, the metallic taste of adrenaline coating her tongue. Her body knows what her mind is still processing. This is not shock. This is recognition. How many times had she walked past half-open doors and chosen not to look? How many conversations had ended abruptly when she entered a room? How many glances between Darius and his advisors carried meanings she pretended not to decode? The palace had taught her to be useful, valuable, indispensable, but it had never taught her to be seen. Selene turns away from the council chamber and continues down the corridor. Her stride does not change. Her breathing remains steady. To any observer, she is simply the queen going about her duties, carrying medicine to an elder who needs relief from winter pain. No one watching would suspect that everything just shifted beneath her feet. She delivers the medicine to Elder Sorella's chambers on the western wing. The old woman sits beside her fire wrapped in furs, her fingers twisted like winter branches. She accepts the remedies with a nod and asks 3 questions about dosage and preparation. Selene answers each one with the calm professionalism that has defined her entire adult life. How is the king? Sorella asks. Busy, Selene replies. The border negotiations continue. Sorella studies her for a long moment, those ancient eyes reading something in Selene's expression that perhaps even Selene has not yet named. You look tired, child. I am fine, elder. The lie tastes like ash. Sorella reaches out with one gnarled hand and touches Selene's wrist. When I was young, she says, I married a man my family chose. Good bloodline, strong territory, all the right political advantages. He was kind to me in public and indifferent in private. I spent 30 years being useful to him before I understood the difference between being valued and being understood. Selene meets the old woman's gaze. What did you do? Sorella smiles, but there is no warmth in it. I waited until he died. Then I lived the last 20 years of my life exactly as I pleased. But child, I would not recommend my path. Waiting for permission to exist is a slow kind of death. The words settle into Selene's chest like stones dropping into deep water. She thanks the elder and leaves. The walk back to the royal chambers feels longer than it should. Every corridor seems to stretch. Every guard she passes seems to be watching her with new eyes. Or perhaps she has simply seen the Citadel differently now, the way a patient sees their body differently after diagnosis. The disease was always there. She just finally has a name for it. Selene returns to the royal chambers just after midnight. The rooms are empty. Darius is still somewhere in the Citadel, doing whatever it is kings do when they believe their queens will wait forever. She stands in the center of their bedroom and looks at the space as if seeing it for the first time. The four-poster bed carved from blackwood. The silver wolf crest above the mantel. The wardrobe filled with gowns she wore to ceremonies where she smiled beside her mate and pretended not to notice how often his attention drifted elsewhere. This room is a monument to a woman who no longer exists. Or perhaps, Selene thinks, to a woman who never existed at all. Just a convenient fiction. The perfect queen, the loyal mate, the skilled healer who asked nothing for herself and gave everything to the throne. She crosses to the window and looks out over Blackthorn Citadel. Even at this hour, lights burn in various towers. The Empire never sleeps. There is always another crisis, another negotiation, another territorial dispute that requires the king's attention. And there is always a queen who waits, who understands, who asks no inconvenient questions. Selene's reflection stares back at her from the dark glass. She barely recognizes the woman looking back. When did she become so practiced at disappearing? When did she learn to make herself smaller so the king could seem larger? Her father's voice echoes through memory. A healer's first duty is to see the wound clearly, not the wound you wish was there, not the wound that would be easier to treat, the actual damage in all its ugly truth. Selene sees it now. The wound is not Darius's infidelity. The wound is her own complicity in becoming less than she is. She opens the wardrobe and pulls out a worn leather pack, the kind she carried before crowns and council chambers became her landscape. The pack still smells faintly of herbs and road dust, remnants of a life she lived before palace walls closed around her. She fills it with practical things, her healer's blades, the surgical tools her father gave her when she completed her training. Each blade is wrapped in oiled cloth, edges still sharp enough to split skin with the barest pressure. Her father's treatment ledgers, 20 years of cases documented in his precise hand. Every diagnosis, every remedy, every outcome, successful or otherwise. These ledgers represent more accumulated knowledge than any royal library. 2 changes of plain clothing. Wool and linen, sturdy fabrics that can withstand weather and work. Nothing embroidered, nothing that carries the weight of ceremony. A fire-starting kit. Flint and steel and charcloth sealed in a waterproof pouch. The silver case containing her bone needles and suturing wire. Tools so fine they can close wounds without leaving scars. A small purse containing the money she earned before marriage. Coins she never spent because queens do not need personal funds. The Citadel provides everything, everything except freedom. She leaves behind every gown, every piece of jewelry, every item that carries the weight of Blackthorn expectation. Let the next woman who wears the crown deal with those costumes. Selene is done performing. On the desk, she finds parchment and ink. For several minutes, she sits there staring at the blank page. There is so much she could say. Accusations she could level. Questions she could demand he answer. She could write an entire treatise on the slow erosion of self that happens when you love someone who sees you only as an extension of their own power. But what would be the point? Darius would read it as rebellion, not revelation. He would see her departure as betrayal, not boundary, because that is what the throne teaches. It trains people to mistake access for intimacy, obedience for loyalty, presence for partnership. So Selene writes one word. Enough. Not as accusation, as declaration. She places the note on his pillow, the only territory in this entire palace that he might actually notice her absence. Then she shoulders her pack, takes one last look at the room that was supposed to be hers but never really was, and walks out. The Citadel is quiet at this hour. Most of the household has retired. The guards at their posts are focused outward, watching for threats that might approach the palace, not for queens who might leave it. Selene knows every corridor, every servant passage, every exit that bypasses the main gates where questions would be asked. She moves through the citadel the way water moves through stone, finding the cracks, the gaps, the places where architecture gives way to absence. No one sees her leave, or if they do, they say nothing. Perhaps they understand what she is only beginning to grasp. Sometimes the most powerful choice a person can make is simply to walk away from a situation that demands they be less than they are. The northern road stretches before her like a promise written in frost and starlight. Selene does not look back. Looking back is for people who are uncertain about the path forward. She knows exactly where she is going. Anywhere but here. King Alpha Darius Vareth returns to his chambers at 3 a.m, smelling of wine and council politics. The border treaty with the eastern provinces has collapsed again. 4 hours spent negotiating with diplomats who speak in circles and make promises they have no intention of keeping. Lord Chancellor Veyron insists military pressure is the only language the East understands. Trade Minister Halwick argues for economic sanctions. Everyone talks. No one listens. By the end of it, Darius felt like he was trying to herd wolves using nothing but good intentions. He is tired, bone-deep tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from maintaining an empire that constantly threatens to fracture along a dozen different fault lines. He wants his mate's steady presence. The way Selene listens without judgment and offers insights that cut through political theater like a surgeon's blade through infected tissue. She has a gift for seeing the truth beneath performance, for identifying what people actually want versus what they claim to need. More than once, her quiet observations have saved him from catastrophic miscalculation. The room is dark. He lights a candle and sees the note on his pillow. One word. Enough. For several seconds, Darius stares at the parchment as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something that makes sense. The handwriting is definitely Selene's. That precise script she learned from her father, each letter formed with the same careful attention she applies to everything. But the message makes no sense. Enough what? Enough waiting for him to finish with council business? Enough winter cold seeping through the citadel? Enough of some disagreement he cannot remember having? He sets the note aside and begins removing his formal council attire. The heavy velvet coat, the ceremonial belt, the boots that pinch his feet after hours of standing. That is when he notices the wardrobe standing half open. Darius crosses the room and looks inside. All of Selene's formal gowns remain. The emerald silk she wore to last month's delegation dinner. The midnight blue with silver embroidery she favors for winter ceremonies. The wine-red dress cut in the southern style that makes her look like war and grace combined. But the simple clothes are gone. Her traveling cloak, her sturdy boots, the wool dresses she wears when working in the palace infirmary. Darius opens the drawer where she keeps her personal items. Her healer's case is missing. Her father's ledgers are gone. The small jewelry box containing her mother's ring and the silver bracelet her brother gave her before he died, those are absent. Everything that matters to her has vanished. Everything ornamental remains. The cold thing that settled in his chest when he read the note suddenly blooms into something larger. Not panic, not yet, but the slow recognition that he has miscalculated something fundamental. Darius walks through the chambers checking for other signs. Her hairbrushes are gone. The special tea she drinks each morning has disappeared from the side table. The book of herbal remedies she was studying, nowhere to be found. She did not leave in anger. She left with planning. This was not impulse. This was decision. Darius pulls on his boots and leaves the royal chambers. The night guard stationed outside straightens to attention. Have you seen the queen? No, your majesty, not since sunset. Darius moves through the citadel with growing urgency. He checks the library. Empty. The healing ward. Dark. The meditation garden where Selene sometimes sits when council business drains her. Nothing. He finds Captain Brennan in the guard station reviewing watch schedules. I need you to check if the Queen's horse is still in the stables. Brennan's eyebrows rise slightly, but he is too well trained to question direct orders. He sends a runner. The boy returns 5 minutes later. Bay mare is gone, sir. Tack 2. Groom says he saw Her Majesty take the horse around midnight. Thought she was just going for a night ride. Where's this groom? Sleeping, sir. Should I wake him? Yes. They find the stable hand, a boy of perhaps 16, in the servants' quarters. He stumbles into wakefulness and stands before the king with the kind of terror only absolute power can inspire. You saw the queen take her horse? Yes, your majesty. What did she say? Nothing, your majesty. She just saddled the mare herself and rode out through the north gate. The north gate? Not the main entrance? No, your majesty. The north gate leads to the service road. Did she have anything with her? A pack, your majesty. Looked full. Darius dismisses the boy and turns to Captain Brennan. I want search parties organized. North, south, east, west. Riders on every major road. Start with the north route since that is where she was last seen. I want reports every 4 hours. Your majesty, Brennan says carefully, if the queen has simply gone for an extended ride, organizing search parties might cause unnecessary concern among the household. Darius looks at his captain with the flat expression that precedes violence. The queen has left. Not for a ride. She has left. Organize the search parties now, or I will find a captain who will. Brennan salutes. Yes, your majesty. By dawn, Darius has 300 soldiers mobilized across the Dominion territories. Riders fan out in every direction, carrying descriptions and orders to report any sighting immediately. By mid-morning, the first report arrives. A traveler on the Northern River Road saw a woman matching Selene's description approximately 20 miles from Blackthorn, moving at a steady pace, alone. Heading toward the frontier settlements, Darius stands in the war room surrounded by maps and military advisors, and for the first time in his life as king, he has absolutely no idea what to do. Wars, he understands. Territorial disputes make sense. Political maneuvering follows predictable patterns. But this? A mate who simply walks away without argument, without confrontation, without giving him the chance to fix whatever he apparently broke? This is terrain he has never navigated. Lord Chancellor Veyron clears his throat. Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider the possibility that the Queen has been abducted. A forced departure made to look voluntary. She took her father's medical ledgers, Darius says. Thieves do not stop to pack books. Then perhaps she is ill, Trade Minister Halwick suggests. Some fever that affects judgment. She is a trained physician. She would recognize illness in herself. The advisors exchange glances. Elder Thorne, the oldest member of the council, speaks for the first time. Your Majesty, if I may be direct, have you considered that the Queen simply chose to leave? The room goes very quiet. Darius looks at the elder with an expression that has made stronger men reconsider their words. Why would she choose to leave? Thorne meets his gaze without flinching. That, Your Majesty, is a question only the Queen can answer. But it seems the more relevant question is not why she left, but why you are surprised that she did. Get out, Darius says softly. Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. Get out. All of you, now. The advisors file out quickly, leaving Darius alone with maps that show every territory he controls and none of the insight that might help him understand what just happened. He picks up the note again. Enough. One word that contains 1,000 unspoken grievances. Darius has conquered border provinces. He has negotiated treaties with hostile territories. He has executed traitors and elevated allies. He has maintained an empire through force of will and strategic calculation. But he has never once asked himself whether the woman beside him was happy, whether being queen was what she wanted or simply what she accepted, whether her steady presence was contentment or endurance. The throne teaches many lessons, but it rarely teaches humility. Power convinces people they understand more than they do, that their perspective contains all relevant truth, that disagreement is disloyalty and departure is betrayal. Darius feels something dangerous stir in his chest. Not grief? Not yet. Anger. How dare she simply leave? Without explanation, without negotiation, without giving him the opportunity to address her concerns, whatever those concerns might be, which he will figure out once she returns, which she will. Because queens do not simply abandon their duties, mates do not break bonds without consequences, and empires do not function when people decide the rules no longer apply to them. Darius summons his legal counsel, 3 men in dark robes who smell like old parchment and older grudges. They arrive within the hour and stand before the king with the cautious wariness of people who have learned that royal summons rarely bring good news. The eldest, a skeletal man named Corvain, bows slightly. Your Majesty requested our presence? I need to know what legal mechanisms exist for compelling a royal mate to return to their duties. The three advisors exchange glances. Your Majesty, Corvain says slowly, are we discussing a hypothetical situation or a specific case? Specific. The Queen has abandoned her position. I need her brought back to answer for this desertion. Another glance between the advisors. Desertion is a strong term, Your Majesty. Then provide me with the correct legal terminology for a mate who walks away from their bonded obligations without notice or explanation. Corvain pulls a scroll from his case and unrolls it on the table. The Dominion marriage laws are quite clear on the subject of bonded contracts. Both parties enter into a legally binding agreement to fulfill certain duties. If one party abandons those duties, the other party has grounds to file formal charges. What charges specifically? Corvain traces his finger down the document. Desertion of royal duty, theft of Dominion property if she took items not legally hers, unauthorized departure from bonded contract, potential violation of Healer Guild regulations if she practices independently without proper authorization from the Crown. She is a licensed physician, Darius says. She can practice anywhere. Not as a former royal consort, Corvain says. Royal healers operate under special dispensation from the throne. That dispensation technically expires if the healer leaves Crown service without formal release. Darius leans forward. Are you telling me I can legally prevent her from practicing medicine? Corvain shifts uncomfortably. Not prevent, Your Majesty, but you can require she answer charges before the Imperial Tribunal regarding the legality of her independent practice, especially if she is treating patients without proper documentation of her current status. File the charges. Corvain's eyebrows rise. Your Majesty, charges against a sitting queen are unprecedented. The political implications could be severe. She is not sitting anywhere, Darius snaps. She is gone. File the charges. Formally. Through the Imperial Tribunal. I want her compelled to appear and answer for this abandonment. Your Majesty, the youngest advisor ventures, perhaps a private envoy might be more appropriate. A message requesting her return rather than legal compulsion. I tried private. I waited. I gave her space. And she used that space to disappear into the frontier like some common fugitive. So now we do this the formal way. File the charges. Today. The advisors bow and retreat. Darius returns to the war room and stares at the map showing northern territories. Somewhere out there, Selene is pretending she can simply walk away from 11 years of shared life, from obligations that bind deeper than personal preference, from a bond that does not dissolve just because one person decides they have had enough. She will learn. The throne does not beg, it commands, and commands are answered, one way or another. Late that night, sitting alone in the chambers Selene abandoned, Darius reads her note for the 100th time. Enough. He tells himself this is about maintaining order, about upholding the structures that keep the Dominion functional, about ensuring people understand that bonds have consequences and duties cannot simply be discarded when they become inconvenient. He tells himself this has nothing to do with the fact that she left, that she chose freedom over him, that the steady presence he relied on turned out to be a woman he never really knew at all. He tells himself many things. None of them are true. But kings rarely have to face their own lies, at least not until those lies come back to destroy them. Isung. The northern settlement of Ashmore clings to the riverbank like a scar that refuses to heal properly. 200 souls living in wood and stone structures that smell of fish smoke and honest labor. No jeweled halls here, no velvet politics, just the kind of place where people value what you can do more than what you claim to be. The settlement sits at the junction where the Blackwater River bends east, creating a natural harbor that fishermen have used for 3 generations. Buildings cluster along the waterfront in no particular order, each structure built according to need rather than planning. A smokehouse squats beside a grain storage barn. The tavern shares a wall with the blacksmith. Everything practical, nothing wasted on appearance. Selene arrives on a morning wrapped in fog so thick the river becomes invisible, just the sound of water moving somewhere beyond the gray. She has been riding for 3 days. Her body aches in places she forgot could hurt. Her hands are blistered from rains. Her thighs protest every movement after 70 miles in the saddle with minimal rest. But she has never felt more alive. The frontier smells different from the citadel. No perfumed braziers, no carefully cultivated gardens, just wood smoke and fish and the cold mineral scent of river water. Real smells from real work done by real people who do not have time for performance. She finds Elder Garin Vale outside the settlement hall, a man built like an oak stump with hands scarred from decades of physical work. He is examining a wagon wheel, running his fingers over the rim looking for weakness. He glances up as Selene approaches. "Help you? I am looking for Elder Vale." "You found him." Selene dismounts, her legs nearly buckling from 3 days of hard riding. "I am a healer. I heard Ashmore might need one." Garin sets down the wheel and studies her with the flat pragmatism of someone who has learned not to trust appearances. "Heard from who?" "Merchants at Crosshaven mentioned it. Said your last healer died over the winter." Garin grunts. "Marcus died 4 months ago. Had a stroke while treating the butcher's son. Fell right into the fire. By the time we pulled him out, the burns were too severe. He lasted 2 days before his heart gave out." Selene nods. "I'm sorry for your loss. You knew him?" "No. But I know what it means when a settlement loses its healer. People die from injuries that should not be fatal. Children die from fevers that should have been treatable. The entire community becomes more fragile." Garon's expression shifts slightly. "You talk like you know frontier medicine. I trained under physician Aldrich Vareth, spent 5 years working in border settlements before I moved to the capital. The lie comes easily. Not entirely false. Just edited to remove the parts involving crowns and palaces." Garon crosses his arms. "Vareth. I knew an Aldrich Vareth. Ran a healing house down in Thornhaven. Man could set a bone faster than most people could diagnose a break." "He dead?" "Yes. 3 years ago. My condolences." "He was good people. He was my father." Garin's eyebrows rise. "That's so." Selene produces her guild certification, signed by the master healers of Thornhaven before she ever met a king or wore a crown. The document is worn from travel but still legitimate, bearing seals that prove her training and credentials. Garin examines the certification carefully, reading every line. Says here you completed advanced surgical training. Says you specialized in trauma medicine and obstetrics. Says you are authorized to practice independently anywhere within Dominion territories. That is correct. Garin hands back the certification. What brings a trauma surgeon with obstetrics training to a fishing settlement that barely has 200 people? Selene meets his gaze. I got tired of politics getting between me and patients. Garin studies her for a long moment. You running from something? Everyone is running from something. Question is whether I can do the job. Fair enough. We got a healing house by the river. Been empty since Marcus died. You can use it if you can make it work. We do not have fancy equipment. We do not have palace budgets. But we have people who get hurt and sick, and we could use someone who knows which end of a needle to use. Selene nods. What is the arrangement? You heal. We provide food, firewood, basic supplies. You need something special, you negotiate. Patients pay what they can, when they can. Sometimes that is coin, sometimes that is labor, sometimes that is goods. You take what comes and figure it out. Fair? Fair. Garin spits into the dirt beside his boot. One more thing. I do not care who you were before you got here. I care what you do now. Ashmore does not give a damn about your past as long as you pull your weight in the present. Half the people here are running from something. Debts, failed marriages, crimes they may or may not have committed. We do not ask. We do not tell. You show up, you work, you earn your place. That is the only law that matters. We clear? Crystal clear. Good. House is third one from the river. Keys are under the front step. Roof leaks in the northwest corner. Floors rotted through in 2 places. Chimney draws smoke but needs cleaning. You fix it, it is yours. Welcome to the frontier, healer. He picks up the wagon wheel and walks away without ceremony, leaving Selene standing in the fog with her pack and her father's ledgers and the closest thing to freedom she has felt in 11 years. She leads her horse toward the river, counting buildings until she finds the third structure from the water. The healing house is a disaster. Single-room construction, maybe 20 feet by 30 feet. Broken windows, rotted floorboards in the places Garen mentioned and several others he did not. The door hangs crooked on its hinges. Inside smells like mouse droppings and mildew and abandonment. Shelves line the walls, but they are thick with dust and debris. The examination table is warped from water damage. The fireplace is filled with old ash and something that might be a bird's nest. Selene stands in the center of the single room and feels something dangerous stir in her chest. Hope. Not the fragile kind that wilts under pressure. The fierce kind that survives despite evidence. She drops her pack and gets to work. The first week is pure labor. She borrows tools from the settlement blacksmith and replaces the broken window glass with oiled parchment until she can afford proper panes. She tears out the rotted floorboards and patches the gaps with planks scavenged from an abandoned dock structure. She climbs onto the roof and repairs the leak with tar and shingles purchased using the last of her personal coins. Her hands blister, her back screams, her shoulders ache from hauling water and scrubbing surfaces. She loves every minute of it, because this pain is different from palace pain. This is the pain of building, not maintaining. The pain of creating something from nothing, rather than preserving something that was never really hers. By the end of the first week, the healing house has clean floors, functional windows, and a fireplace that draws smoke properly. Selene scrubs every surface with lye and hot water until the smell of decay gives way to the sharp scent of cleanliness. She builds new shelves from scrap lumber, measuring and cutting with the precision her father taught her. Measure twice, cut once, he used to say. Haste is the enemy of accuracy. She organizes her supplies with obsessive care. Herbs cataloged by type and potency. Surgical tools arranged by function. Bandages sorted by size and material. Everything has a place. Everything serves a purpose. Her father's voice echoes through the work. Truth survives because someone writes it down. So Selene writes. She creates patient intake forms, treatment logs, herb inventory lists, supply requisition documents, every detail recorded in clear script that will outlast memory and rumor. The settlement watches her with cautious curiosity. A woman living alone is unusual, but not unheard of in frontier towns. A woman who works from dawn until dark repairing a building with her own hands that earns a certain respect. On the 8th day, Selene wakes to find a basket of smoked fish on her doorstep. No note, no explanation, just food and the implicit message, you are working hard enough to deserve sustenance. On the 10th day, the blacksmith stops by with an old medical cabinet he salvaged from somewhere. Thought you might use this, he says. Doors stick, but the shelves are solid. Thank you. What do I owe you? He shrugs. You fixed my nephew's hand last night. Consider us even. Selene blinks. I have not treated anyone yet. Sure you did. Jory. Cut himself on a forge edge. Came by around midnight bleeding all over. You cleaned it and stitched it without even asking his name. That was your nephew? That was my sister's boy. Good kid. Clumsy with sharp things. You did clean work. Stitches were tight and even. He will have a scar but nothing infected. That is worth a cabinet. He leaves before Selene can respond. She had treated the boy. Late night. He showed up bleeding and apologetic. She stitched the wound by candlelight, explained wound care, sent him off with instructions to keep it clean and dry. She had not expected payment. She certainly had not expected furniture. But this is how frontier economics work. Value for value. Skill for goods. Time for time. No one tracks debts to the exact coin. Everyone simply remembers who helped and who did not. Word spreads the way it does in small places. The healer knows her business. The healer does not ask questions. The healer treats everyone the same, whether they smell like fish guts or wear decent clothes. A woman shows up on day 12 with a child running fever. The boy is maybe 4 years old, skin hot to the touch, eyes glassy with delirium. Selene takes his temperature, examines his throat, checks for rash. How long has he been like this? Since yesterday morning. Any cough? Difficulty breathing? Some coughing last night. Vomiting? No. Selene mixes willow bark tea and adds a measure of elderflower. This will help reduce the fever. Give him a cup every 4 hours. Keep him cool but not cold. Wipe his forehead and neck with damp cloth. If the fever does not break by morning, bring him back. What do I owe you? Selene waves the question away. Bring him back if he is not better. That is payment enough. The woman hesitates. You are sure? I am sure. The woman leaves with her feverish child and returns 3 days later with the boy healthy and energetic. She carries a basket of fresh bread still warm from the oven. He is well. Thank you. I am glad. This is for you. You did not need to. Yes, I did. You saved him. I gave him tea and instructions. You saved him by following them. The woman leaves the bread anyway. This becomes the pattern. A miner arrives with a hand crushed in a rock fall, 3 fingers broken, palm split open, blood everywhere. Selene sets the bones one by one, each movement precise and careful. She stitches the torn flesh with the same attention she once gave to palace nobility, wraps everything in clean bandages soaked in golden seal tincture to prevent infection. Keep this elevated, she tells him. Change the bandages daily. If you see red streaks spreading up your arm, or if the pain gets worse instead of better, come back immediately. That means infection, and infection will kill you faster than the original injury. The miner nods, his face pale with pain and shock. What do I owe you? Come back in 5 days so I can check the healing. If everything looks good, we can discuss payment then. He returns on day 5 with a wagon full of firewood. Heard you needed wood for winter. Figured this would cover it. This is enough firewood for 3 winters. Then I guess I am paying in advance. Word spreads faster. Within a month, Selene has more patients than hours in the day. Fishermen with infected wounds, children with winter coughs, pregnant women needing reassurance that the life growing inside them is developing properly. Old people with joint pain that makes every movement agony. She treats them all, works by candlelight when daylight fails, compounds remedies while her own dinner grows cold, updates her records with the same obsessive precision her father taught her. Every patient logged, every treatment documented, every outcome recorded. Because truth survives when someone writes it down, and Selene intends her truth to survive long after she is gone. The work is hard. The conditions are rough. She earns less in a month than she spent on a single palace gown, and she has never been happier. Because this life is hers, not given, not assigned, not shaped around someone else's needs, built by her own hands from her own choices. One evening, while grinding dried colt's foot for a cough remedy, Selene pauses and looks around the healing house. The shelves are organized, the floor is clean, firelight dances across walls she repaired herself. Patient records sit stacked neatly on the desk her father used in Thornhaven, transported here with everything else that mattered. This is a life, not a performance of life, not a simulation of purpose, actual meaning created through actual work that actually helps actual people. For the first time since walking out of Blackthorn Citadel, Selene allows herself to cry. Not from sadness, from relief. The tears last maybe 30 seconds. Then she wipes her eyes, returns to grinding herbs, and gets back to the only work that has ever made sense. Healing. Late that same evening, while compounding medicine for tomorrow's patients, Selene hears a knock. She opens the door to find a girl of perhaps 12 years, all sharp angles and fierce eyes, holding her left hand wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth. I cut it, the girl says without preamble. On a gutting knife. My mother says you will fix it. Selene gestures her inside. Sit. The girl sits on the examination table, her posture straight despite obvious pain. Selene unwraps the cloth carefully. The cut runs across the palm, deep enough to need stitches but clean, no debris embedded in the wound. What is your name? Mira Thorn. Well, Mira Thorn, this is going to hurt. Can you handle pain? The girl lifts her chin. I gutted 17 fish before I cut myself. I can handle pain. Selene almost smiles. Good, because I need you to hold very still while I clean this and stitch it closed. If you move, the stitches will not set properly, and you will have problems later. I will not move. Selene pours distilled alcohol over the wound. Mira hisses through her teeth, but does not pull away. Good, Selene says. That is the worst part. She threads her bone needle with silk suture and begins the careful work of closing flesh. The girl watches with intense curiosity, no fear visible in her expression. Why did you leave the palace? Mira asks. Selene pauses mid-stitch. Who says I was at a palace? Everyone knows. You talk like educated people. You move like someone used to being watched. And you have that look in your eyes like you have seen things you wish you could forget. Selene continues stitching. You are very observant for someone who just turned 12. 13 next month. And you did not answer the question. No, I did not. Mira waits. Selene ties off another stitch. I left because I was tired of being useful without being valued. Mira considers this. My father says people who leave palaces usually had no choice. I had a choice. I made it. Was it hard? Yes. Was it worth it? Selene looks at the healing house, at the shelves she built, at the records she maintains, at the girl sitting in front of her with a wounded hand and eyes that see too much. Ask me in a year. Fair enough. Selene ties off the final stitch and wraps the hand in clean linen. Keep this dry for 3 days. Come back in a week so I can check the healing. If you see any redness spreading or feel heat around the wound, come back immediately. Infection is nothing to ignore. Mira stands. You are different from what I expected. What did you expect? Someone broken. And what do you see instead? Mira studies her with those fierce young eyes that miss nothing. Someone who chose a different kind of strong. She walks out into the night, leaving Selene alone with her remedies and her records, and the realization that perhaps the greatest power is not ruling others. It is ruling yourself. 3 months pass. Winter settles over Ashmore like a fist clenching around Riverstone. The temperature drops until even the river starts forming ice along the edges. Wind cuts through gaps in buildings with relentless efficiency. Snow falls in sheets that bury the settlement under white silence. Selene's practice grows. She treats frostbite and winter fever, sets bones broken on ice-slick docks, and delivers 2 babies when the midwife falls ill with pneumonia. She works 18-hour days and sleeps in 4-hour increments, always ready for the knock that means someone needs help. The settlement absorbs her into its rhythms. She learns who drinks too much and gets careless with knives, which children are prone to winter coughs, which old people need regular visits just to make sure they are still eating properly. She becomes part of the ecosystem, not as decoration, as function. Mira Thorne becomes a regular presence at the healing house. The girl appears 3 or 4 times a week with questions about anatomy, disease, treatment methods. She wants to know everything and accepts nothing without explanation. Why does willow bark reduce fever? Because it contains salicin, which your body converts to salicylic acid. That reduces inflammation and blocks the mechanisms that raise body temperature. How do you know how deep to stitch? By understanding tissue layers. Skin is just the surface. Beneath that is subcutaneous fat, then muscle, then deeper structures. You stitch through enough layers to hold tension without going so deep you damage what does not need touching. What happens if you stitch too deep? You hit blood vessels and cause bleeding, or you catch nerves and create pain, or you penetrate into body cavities and introduce infection where it should not go. Depth matters as much as technique. Mira absorbs every answer like soil absorbs rain. One afternoon, after helping Selene organize herb shipments, the girl asks the question Selene has been expecting for weeks. Will you teach me? Teach you what? Healing. Selene sets down the jar of comfrey she was shelving. Why do you want to learn? Because I'm tired of being helpless. Last winter, my little brother got sick with lung fever. We had no healer. My mother tried everything she knew. He died anyway. I held him while he stopped breathing, and I could not do anything to help. Selene sees her own younger self in this girl's fierce determination. Healing is hard work. Most of it is boring. Cleaning wounds, grinding herbs, keeping records. The dramatic moments are rare and usually involve watching people die despite your best efforts. I do not need it to be exciting. I need it to be useful. It will take years of study. I have years. You will see things that scar you. Better scars from learning than scars from helplessness. Selene studies the girl carefully. If I teach you, you follow my instructions exactly. No improvisation, no shortcuts. Medicine is precision work, and precision requires discipline. I can be disciplined. You come every day. Dawn until dusk. No excuses. I will be here. And you understand that most of what I teach you is how to recognize when you cannot help someone. Knowing your limits is more important than knowing your capabilities. Mira nods. Selene extends her hand. Then we have a deal. They shake on it and Selene gains an apprentice. The weeks blur together in the rhythm of frontier winter. Patients come and go. Mira learns how to clean wounds properly, how to prepare basic remedies, how to recognize symptoms that require immediate intervention versus conditions that will resolve on their own. Selene does not think about Blackthorn Citadel. She does not wonder what Darius is doing. She focuses on the work in front of her, the patients who need her skill, the knowledge she spent decades accumulating and can finally use without political interference. Then, on a gray morning thick with sleet, Elder Garen appears at her door holding an official scroll sealed with the silver wolf crest of the Vareth Dominion. "This came for you," he says. His expression tells her everything she needs to know. Selene's hands are covered in blood from stitching a fisherman's leg wound. She wipes them on a clean cloth and takes the scroll. "Thank you, Elder." Garen does not leave. "You need anything?" "Not yet. But she will. She knows she will." Selene waits until the fisherman is bandaged and instructed and paid and gone. Then she sits at her desk, opens the scroll, and reads. Formal charges filed with the Imperial Tribunal by His Majesty King Alpha Darius Vareth, Sovereign of the Vareth Dominion. Charge 1. Desertion of royal duty and abandonment of bonded obligations without formal notice or legal dissolution. Charge 2. Theft of Dominion property, specifically medical instruments and documentation belonging to the Crown Healing Service. Charge 3. Unlawful independent practice of medicine without proper authorization from the reigning sovereign, in violation of guild regulations governing former royal physicians. Mandatory appearance before the High Council in Frostspire Hall 30 days hence, to answer said charges and submit to tribunal judgment. Failure to appear will result in immediate issuance of criminal warrant and authorization for forcible retrieval by Dominion Guard. Signed and sealed this day by royal authority. Selene reads the document 3 times. Each word is carefully chosen. Legal language designed to make her departure sound like crime. Her freedom framed as theft. Her choice recast as violation. She sets the scroll on her desk beside her father's ledgers and looks at it for a long time. This is not justice. This is punishment disguised as law. Darius is using the only weapon he has left, institutional power. Selene stands and walks to the window. Outside, sleet falls across Ashmore in gray sheets. The river runs dark and cold. Smoke rises from chimneys where people are trying to stay warm enough to survive another frontier winter. These people need her, not as ornament, as healer. She has built something here, something real, something that matters. And Darius wants to destroy it because she had the audacity to choose herself over his empire. Selene turns back to her desk and pulls out clean parchment. She writes a single name, Cassian Vel. Then she goes to find Elder Garen. She finds him at the settlement hall reviewing supply inventories with the quartermaster. Elder, I need to hire an advocate, someone familiar with Dominion law and Imperial tribunal procedures. Garen looks up from his ledgers. You planning to fight these charges? Yes. Good. You should. They are bullshit charges filed by a man who cannot handle rejection like an adult. Selene almost smiles. That is my assessment as well. But I need professional representation. Garen nods. Cassian Vel, best legal mind in the Northern Territories. Mean as a winter river and twice as cold, he is expensive. How expensive? 100 gold for the consultation, 500 if he takes your case, more if it goes longer than a week at tribunal. Selene calculates quickly. She has maybe 200 gold left from her personal funds. The rest went to supplies and building repairs. I will pay what he asks. You sure? That is your entire savings. I am sure. Because some things are worth more than money. Freedom, for instance. The right to live a life she chooses rather than one chosen for her. The ability to practice medicine without someone else deciding when and how and for whose benefit. Garen gives her directions to Vel's office in Crosshaven, 3 days' ride south. He is particular about appointments, Garen warns. Send a message first. Do not just show up. I will send a message. And Selene? Yes? Whatever happened at that palace, whatever you left behind, you built something good here. People respect you. They trust you. Do not let some king with wounded pride take that away. Selene meets his gaze. I do not intend to. She returns to the healing house and composes a letter to Advocate Cassian Vel. Brief, professional. Outlining the charges and requesting representation. She sends it by courier that afternoon. 3 days later, she receives a response. Consultation scheduled. Be prepared to document everything. Bring all relevant paperwork. My retainer is 100 gold, payable upon arrival. If I take your case, the fee is 500 gold plus expenses. Also, bring copies of any treatment records you have maintained. If the Crown is claiming you practiced illegally, we will bury them in evidence of professional competence. Cassian Vel, Advocate. Selene reads the letter twice. Then she opens her father's ledgers and begins copying every treatment record she has created since arriving in Ashmore. Every patient, every diagnosis, every remedy dispensed, every outcome tracked. If Darius wants to use law as a weapon, she will answer with documentation. Because truth survives when someone writes it down. And Selene has written down everything. Mira finds her working late that night, transcribing records by candlelight. What are you doing? Preparing for war? With the king? With lies disguised as law? Mira sits down across from her. Are you scared? Selene looks up from her writing, terrified. But fear is not a good reason to surrender. What is a good reason? Being actually wrong, which I am not. Then you will win. Selene wishes she had Mira's certainty. The tribunal is not about right and wrong. It is about power and precedent, about whether a king can use law to punish someone for leaving him. That seems like something worth fighting. It is. Then fight. Selene returns to her transcription, and Mira stays with her through the night, helping copy records and organize documentation. 2 weeks later, Selene rides south to meet with Advocate Cassian Vel. The consultation lasts 4 hours. Vel is exactly what Garen described: sharp, cold, ruthlessly efficient. He reads through every charge, every piece of documentation, every treatment record. Then he looks at Selene with eyes like winter ice. They have no case. The charges are vindictive nonsense filed by a man who is abusing legal mechanisms to punish personal betrayal. But that does not mean you will win. The tribunal is political. The judges answer to the crown, even if they pretend otherwise. We need to make it impossible for them to rule against you without exposing themselves as corrupt. How do we do that? Evidence. Overwhelming, undeniable, documented evidence that you are exactly what you claim to be: a licensed, competent physician practicing legally within your guild rights. We bury them in proof until ruling against you becomes more politically costly than ruling for you. Can you do that? Vel smiles, but there's no warmth in it. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never lost a case I actually prepared for. He extends his hand. 500 gold. I take your case. Selene shakes his hand and pays the retainer. Then she rides back to Ashmore and prepares for the fight of her life. Because the throne can demand many things, but it cannot demand that she return to being smaller than she is. And if Darius wants a war fought with laws and tribunals instead of swords and soldiers, then she will give him exactly that. A war where truth is the only weapon that matters, and where the queen he underestimated will teach him the most dangerous lesson power ever learns. Some bonds, once broken, cannot be commanded back into place. They can only be earned, or lost forever. The tribunal date arrives with the weight of inevitability. Selene packs her documentation, her father's ledgers, and her guild certifications. Mira helps her load everything onto her horse. You're coming back, right? Selene looks at the healing house she rebuilt with her own hands. One way or another, that is not an answer. It is the only answer I have. Mira grabs her hand, then make it the right answer. Come back. Selene squeezes the girl's hand once, then mounts her horse and rides south toward Frostspire Hall, toward the tribunal that will decide whether she is criminal or free, toward the confrontation with a king who believes power grants him ownership over people he claims to love, toward truth that will either save her or destroy her. The northern road stretches ahead like a blade balanced on edge, one slip either direction, freedom or chains. Selene rides forward into the unknown, carrying nothing but evidence and the fierce certainty that she would rather lose everything than return to a life that required her to be less than she is. Behind her, Ashmore fades into winter fog. Ahead, Frostspire Hall waits like judgment carved from stone, and somewhere between the two, Selene Vareth chooses herself, again and again, until the choice becomes who she is, not just what she does. The Imperial Tribunal convenes in Frostspire Hall 3 days before winter solstice. The chamber is carved from black granite veined with silver, a monument to permanence and authority. High windows filter pale light through sheets of ice, casting the room in tones of gray and blue. 3 elevated seats dominate the north wall, positioned beneath the silver wolf crest of the Vareth dominion. Behind them, tapestries depicting historical judgments hang like warnings. Rebellions crushed, territories claimed, order maintained through the merciless application of law. Selene arrives with advocate Cassian Vel an hour before proceedings begin. Vel is a man built from angles and ice. 60 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a severe knot, wearing black robes that make him look like winter personified. He carries 3 leather cases packed with documentation. They enter through the public gallery, and Vel immediately begins his assessment. North Wall Judge's bench, he says quietly. High Elder Corvain presiding center. Magistrate Thorn to his left, Magistrate Valdis to his right. Corvain is crown-appointed, completely compromised. Thorn is old guard, follows precedent religiously. Valdis is the swing vote. She cares about legacy more than loyalty. What does that mean for us? It means we ignore Corvain entirely. We play to Thorn's obsession with legal precision and Valdis's concern for how history will judge this case. Selene nods and takes her seat at the defendant's table. The gallery begins filling. Minor nobles curious about scandal, merchants interested in legal precedent, a handful of healers from various guilds watching to see if the crown can actually criminalize independent practice. Then Darius enters. He walks into Frostspire Hall like a man who owns the stone beneath his feet. Midnight armor polished to mirror finish. The ceremonial sword of sovereignty belted at his waist. Crown sitting heavy on dark hair. Every inch the warrior king, carrying authority the way other men carry breath. But Selene sees what the crowd does not. The tension in his shoulders, the controlled precision of his movements, the way his eyes search the chamber before finding her. Their gazes meet across 30 feet of cold stone. For 3 seconds, neither looks away. Then Darius takes his seat at the prosecution table beside the crown's legal advocate, a skeletal man named Rendal, who smells like ambition and old parchment. The high elders enter and the chamber rises. Corvain sits center, a man shaped like a vulture with eyes that calculate advantage in every situation. Thorn settles to his left, ancient and deliberate, moving as if even gravity requires careful consideration. Valdis takes the right seat, a woman of perhaps 50 with the kind of face that reveals nothing and remembers everything. Corvain strikes the judgment bell. The Imperial Tribunal is now in session. We gather to hear charges brought by His Majesty King Alpha Darius Vareth against Selene Vareth, formerly Queen Consort of the Vareth Dominion. The accused stands charged with desertion of royal duty, theft of crown property, and unlawful independent practice of medicine. How does the accused answer these charges? Vel rises. Not guilty on all counts, Your Honors. Furthermore, we contend these charges represent malicious prosecution designed to punish lawful personal choice through abuse of legal mechanism. Corvain's eyebrows rise. That is quite an accusation, Advocate Vel. It is quite an accurate accusation, Your Honor. Corvain looks like he wants to say more, but Magistrate Thorn leans forward. We will hear opening statements. Crown Advocate Rendal, you may proceed. Rendal stands and begins his performance, because that is what it is. Performance. Your Honors, he says, voice carrying the rehearsed cadence of a man who has given this speech 100 times in imagination. This case concerns the fundamental question of duty. When a person accepts a position of public trust, when they bond themselves to sovereign authority, when they assume responsibilities that affect the stability of an entire nation, do they retain the right to simply walk away without consequence? He gestures towards Selene. The defendant did not merely leave a marriage. She abandoned a crown. She deserted obligations that extended far beyond personal preference. And in doing so, she took property belonging to the Dominion, practiced medicine without proper authorization, and created legal chaos that undermines the very foundations of bonded governance. Rendal spreads documents across the prosecution table. We will demonstrate that the defendant's actions constitute clear violation of Dominion law, that her departure was theft disguised as independence, that her current practice in Ashmore operates outside guild regulation and crown authority, and that allowing such desertion to stand unpunished sets a precedent that threatens every bonded relationship in the empire. He sits down with the satisfied expression of a man who believes he just delivered killing argument. Vel stands. He does not walk to the center of the chamber, does not raise his voice, simply stands at the defendant's table and speaks with the flat precision of someone stating obvious truth. Your Honors, my opponent just argued that leaving a bad situation should be criminal, that enduring mistreatment is a legal obligation, that personal autonomy ends the moment someone accepts public position. He is wrong on the law, wrong on the facts, and wrong on the fundamental principles that separate free society from tyranny. Vel opens one of his leather cases. We will demonstrate 3 realities. First, that every item the defendant took belonged to her personally, purchased with her own funds or inherited from her father. Second, that she is a fully licensed physician with guild standing that predates her marriage and continues independent of Crown employment. Third, that her departure from the palace constituted the lawful exercise of personal choice, not desertion of duty, and that these charges represent nothing more than a powerful man weaponizing law to punish a woman who refused to stay where he wanted her. Vel looks directly at Corvain. Some people believe power grants ownership over others. This tribunal will determine whether that belief has any basis in Dominion law. I submit it does not. He sits. The chamber is absolutely silent, because everyone just heard what Vel did not say directly. This case is not about law. It is about whether kings can use legal machinery to punish personal rejection. Corvain shifts in his seat. We will hear evidence. Crown may call its first witness. Rendall stands. The Crown calls Captain Brennan of the Citadel Guard. A soldier enters. Middle-aged. Competent. The kind of man who follows orders without questioning their moral foundation. Rendall walks him through the night. Selene disappeared. The empty chambers, the missing horse, the search parties deployed across Dominion territories. And Captain, when you discovered the Queen had left, what was His Majesty's reaction? Brennan shifts uncomfortably. He was concerned for her safety. Just concerned? He wanted her found and returned safely. Did he at any point express anger or betrayal? Objection, Vel says without standing. The king's emotional state is not relevant to whether my client violated any law. Sustained, Thorne says. Advocate Rendall, confine yourself to material facts. Rendall nods and tries a different angle. Captain, in your experience, when a member of the royal household departs suddenly in the night, is that considered normal behavior? No. What is it considered? Concerning, potentially dangerous, worthy of investigation. And did His Majesty order such investigation? Yes. Search parties in all directions. Because he was concerned for the Queen's safety? Yes. Your witness. Vel stands and approaches the captain. Captain Brennan, how long have you served in the Citadel Guard? 16 years. And in those 16 years, has anyone ever been prohibited from leaving the Citadel? Prohibited? No. So people are free to come and go? Within reason, yes. What does within reason mean? It means guests and household staff require permission for extended absences, security protocols. And does the Queen count as a guest or staff? Brennan hesitates. She is the Queen, which means what exactly? Is she employed by the Crown? Not in the traditional sense. Is she a prisoner requiring permission to leave? Of course not. So she is a free person who happens to live at the Citadel? Brennan looks at Rendall, searching for guidance. I suppose that is accurate. Then explain to me, Captain, why a free person leaving their residence constitutes a crime worthy of tribunal. Silence. Captain? It was sudden. No notice. Free people do not require notice to move residences. Or does Dominion law now mandate citizens inform the government before changing address? Rendall stands. Objection. Advocate Vel is mischaracterizing the situation. Am I? Vel asks. Because your entire case rests on the premise that my client leaving her home is somehow criminal. I'm simply asking your witness to explain what law she violated by doing so. Thorne leans forward. Advocate Rendall, that is actually a relevant question. What specific statute did the defendant violate by leaving the Citadel? Rendall shuffles papers. The charge is desertion of royal duty, Your Honor. Abandonment of bonded obligations. Magistrate Valdez speaks for the first time. Advocate Vel, does your client dispute that she was bonded to the king? No, Your Honor. But bonding is a personal relationship, not a legal indenture. My client exercised her right to end a personal relationship. That is not desertion, that is autonomy. Valdez nods slowly. Continue your examination. Vel returns his attention to Captain Brennan. You testified that His Majesty wanted my client found and returned safely. What happened when she was located? We received reports she was in Ashmore settlement. Did anyone travel to Ashmore to check on her safety? Not immediately. Why not? Rendall objects. The captain cannot speculate on strategic decisions. Sustained. Vel smiles slightly. Let me rephrase. Captain, after confirming my client was safe and healthy in Ashmore, did His Majesty send envoys asking her to return? Not to my knowledge. Did he send messages? Not through official channels. What did he do? He consulted with legal counsel. And what resulted from those consultations? These charges. So to clarify, His Majesty discovered his wife was safe and practicing medicine in a frontier settlement, and his response was not to communicate with her but to file criminal charges? Objection, Rendall says. Mischaracterizes events. Does it? Vel asks. Your witness testified that the king's concern was for my client's safety. Yet upon confirming that safety, instead of relief, we get prosecution. That suggests the actual concern was not safety, but control. Your Honors, Rendall says, this is editorializing. This is truth, Vel responds. Enough, Corvain snaps. Advocate Vel, do you have further questions for this witness? Just one, Your Honor. Vel looks at Brennan. In your 16 years of service, Captain, have you ever seen His Majesty use legal mechanisms to punish someone for personal reasons rather than actual crime? Brennan's jaw tightens. I cannot speak to His Majesty's motivations. That is an answer in itself. No further questions. The morning continues with more witnesses. Palace staff testifying to Selene's sudden departure. Guild officials confirming her credentials, but noting the complications of former royal physicians practicing independently. Each witness Rendall calls, Vel systematically dismantles. By midday, the prosecution's case is starting to look like exactly what it is, a powerful man using institutional authority to punish personal rejection. The tribunal breaks for lunch. Selene sits in a small antechamber with Vel, eating bread and cheese that tastes like dust. They are struggling, Vel says. Rendall expected you to show up alone and overwhelmed. He expected to steamroll you with procedure and precedent. Instead, he is getting buried in the fact that you did nothing actually illegal. Will that be enough? Vel sets down his bread. Legally? Yes. Politically? That depends on whether the tribunal cares more about law or about maintaining royal authority. Corvain will vote against you no matter what. Thorne is starting to see the holes in the prosecution's case. Valdez is the key. If we can make her believe ruling against you damages the tribunal's credibility, we win. How do we do that? By making it impossible for her to rule against you without looking corrupt. Which means this afternoon you testify. Selene's stomach clenches. What do I say? The truth, all of it. What palace life cost you, why you left, what you built in Ashmore. We make them see you as a human being, not a legal abstraction. And we make sure everyone in this chamber understands that ruling against you means ruling that women cannot leave bad situations without crown permission. That is a lot of weight to carry. Vel meets her gaze. You carried a crown for 11 years. You can carry this. The afternoon session begins with Rendall calling his final witness. The crown calls His Majesty King Darius Vareth. The chamber stirs. Kings rarely testify in their own cases. But Darius stands and walks to the witness platform with the measured confidence of a man who has never doubted his right to speak. He wears his authority like armor. Rendall begins gently. Your Majesty, please describe your relationship with the defendant. We were bonded 11 years ago, a union of political alliance and personal affection. She served as queen and primary royal physician. We built a partnership that I believed was mutually beneficial. When did you discover she had left? 3 in the morning, returning from council session. Found her note. Single word. Enough. How did that make you feel? Objection, Vel says. Feelings are not evidence. Your Honors, Rendall counters. His Majesty's emotional state demonstrates the impact of the defendant's actions. Overruled, Corvain says. Answer the question, Your Majesty. Darius looks directly at Selene for the first time since taking the stand, confused, concerned. We had disagreements like any couple, but nothing I considered grounds for abandonment. I feared for her safety, worried she had been coerced or was suffering some crisis I failed to recognize. Did you love her? The question hangs in the air. Darius's expression shifts slightly. Yes. Do you still? That is irrelevant to these proceedings. Is it? Rendall asks. Because if you still love her, it demonstrates these charges are not about malice, but about seeking resolution to a situation that harmed both of you. Vel stands. Your Honors, if opposing counsel wants to argue this is a custody dispute disguised as criminal prosecution, I am happy to have that conversation. But let us stop pretending these charges have anything to do with law. Magistrate Valdis leans forward. Advocate Rendall, what is your point? My point, Your Honor, is that His Majesty filed these charges not out of vindictiveness, but because Dominion law provides no other mechanism for addressing bonded relationships that end without mutual dissolution. So you concede these are not actually criminal charges? Rendall stammers. I concede nothing. I merely note that the law is unclear on how to handle this situation. The law is perfectly clear, Vel says. Adults can end relationships. The fact that one of those adults wears a crown does not change that basic freedom. Thorn interrupts. Advocate Rendall, do you have substantive questions for your witness? Yes, Your Honor. Then ask them. Rendall returns to Darius. Your Majesty, did the defendant take items that belonged to the crown? She took her medical instruments and her father's books. I considered those crown property as they were used in her official capacity. Were they purchased with crown funds? No, she brought them to the marriage, so they were her personal property used in crown service? Technically, yes. And when she left crown service, she took her personal property with her? Darius's jaw tightens. When you frame it that way, it sounds reasonable. But she was not an employee who quit a job. She was a queen who abandoned her duties. What duties specifically? Representing the crown at ceremonial functions, overseeing the palace healing services, serving as diplomatic hostess during state visits, being present as my partner in governance. And did any law compel her to continue those duties against her will? The question lands like a blade. Darius stares at Rendall as if his own advocate just betrayed him. Because that is what just happened. Rendall, trying to establish Selene's obligations, just invited Darius to explain what law required her continued service. And there is no such law. Bonding creates social expectations, not legal slavery. Your Majesty? Rendall prompts. Darius looks at the tribunal, then at Selene, then back to Rendall. Watsies. No law compelled her. But bonds mean something. Vows carry weight. You cannot simply walk away because things become difficult. Vel rises. May I cross-examine now, Your Honors? Proceed. Vel approaches Darius with the careful precision of a surgeon approaching infected tissue. Your Majesty, you testified that you loved the defendant. Yes. And you were confused and concerned when she left. Yes. Yet in the 3 months between her departure and these charges, did you ever travel to Ashmore to speak with her directly? Darius's eyes narrow. I sent messages through official channels. Did you personally attempt to communicate with her? The situation required formal handling. That is not an answer to my question. Did you personally travel to speak with your wife about why she left? No. Why not? Because kings do not chase after people who abandon them. The words echo through the chamber. Vel lets them settle. So to be clear, you claim you love her, you claim you were concerned for her well-being, but you refused to actually speak with her because your pride as a king prevented it. That is a gross mischaracterization. Is it? You just testified that kings do not chase. Which means what, exactly? That royalty is above the basic human action of having difficult conversations with people they supposedly love? Rendall objects, but Vel continues. Your Majesty, when the defendant left, did you ask yourself why? Of course. And what conclusion did you reach? That she was making an irrational decision based on incomplete information. Did you consider that perhaps she had very complete information and was making an entirely rational choice? I considered many possibilities. Did any of those possibilities include the notion that you might have failed her in some fundamental way? Silence. Every eye in the chamber fixes on Darius. Your Majesty, I fulfilled every duty a king owes his queen. That is not what I asked. I asked if you considered that you might have failed her personally, not politically, as a man, not as a king. Darius's hands gripped the witness rail. I gave her everything: status, resources, protection, respect. What more could she want? To be seen, Vel says quietly. To be known. To be valued for who she is rather than what she provides. But those are not commodities a king thinks to offer, are they? You're putting words in my mouth. Am I? Because every answer you have given reveals the same assumption, that providing material benefits equals meeting emotional needs, that giving someone a crown compensates for treating them like an employee rather than a partner. Objection, Rendall shouts. This is not a therapy session. No, Vel agrees. It is a tribunal, and this witness's testimony demonstrates exactly what these charges are really about. A powerful man who cannot accept that someone chose to leave him, so he weaponizes law to force her back into compliance. Your Honors, please, Rendall says, but Magistrate Valdis raises her hand. Advocate Vel, ask your next question. Vel looks at Darius. Your Majesty, on the night the defendant left, where were you? Council chambers. Doing what? Border negotiations with the eastern provinces. Were you alone? The council was present. Anyone else? Darius hesitates. Several advisors, including Lady Morgana Krell? Darius's expression goes carefully blank. Yes, she represents the Northern Trade Alliance. And were you having a private conversation with Lady Krell that evening? We discussed trade routes. Just the two of you? For part of the evening, yes. In a closed chamber? The council chamber door was open. Half open? Another pause. Perhaps. Your Majesty, did you at any point during that conversation with Lady Krell say the words, "She will stay"? She always does in reference to the defendant. The chamber goes absolutely silent. Darius stares at Vel with an expression somewhere between rage and recognition. Because he knows. He knows Selene heard. He knows she left because of those words. He knows this entire case just collapsed. I may have said something similar, Darius finally admits. You may have? It was a casual comment, not meant seriously, but you did say it. Yes. And 12 hours later, your wife left. Did it occur to you that perhaps those words, that casual certainty that she would always stay regardless of how you treated her, might have been the final straw? She was not supposed to hear that, but she did. And what she heard was a man who took her presence so completely for granted that he bragged about it to another woman. No further questions. Vel returns to his seat. Rendall stands, tries to rehabilitate his witness, but the damage is done. Everyone in the chamber now knows the truth. This is not about law. This is about a king who assumed ownership and a woman who refused to be owned. The tribunal calls for afternoon recess. Selene sits with Vel in the antechamber while the enormity of what just happened settles around them. You knew, she says, about that conversation. You knew what Darius said. I suspected. The timing of your departure suggested a triggering event. I gambled that the event was recent and involved witnesses. Darius's reaction confirmed it. That was a risk. Everything about this case is a risk, but now we have him admitting he took you for granted, that he assumed you would endure anything. That shifts the entire narrative. Is it enough? Vel considers. For Thorn, probably. He cares about legal precision, and Darius just admitted there is no legal basis for these charges. For Valdez, maybe. She cares about precedent, and ruling against you now sets a terrible one. For Corvain, no. He was always going to rule for the crown, but 2 out of 3 wins the case. What happens now? Now you testify. You tell your story. You make them understand that leaving was not desertion, but survival. And you present evidence that you have built something legitimate in Ashmore, not some fugitive operation, but a real medical practice serving real people. Selene nods. The tribunal reconvenes. The defense calls Selene Vareth. Selene walks to the witness platform, feeling every eye track her movement. She places her hand on the testimony stone, swears to truth, and sits. Vel begins gently. Please state your full name and profession for the record. Selene Vareth, licensed physician, trained under Aldrich Vareth of Thornhaven, certified by the Master Healers Guild 14 years ago. And you were married to King Darius Vareth? Bonded, yes. 11 years. Describe that bonding. How did it come about? Politically arranged. My father had connections to several noble houses. Darius needed a healer with diplomatic skills. I was young enough to be molded into whatever shape the palace required. It seemed mutually beneficial. Did you love him when you bonded? I respected him, admired his governance, believed the partnership could become love over time. Did it? Selene looks at Darius. I loved what I thought he was. The man who asked my opinion on council matters, who valued my medical expertise, who seemed to see me as more than ornament. But over time I realized he did not love me. He loved my usefulness, my compliance, the version of me that asked nothing and provided everything. When did you realize this? Slowly over years. Then suddenly one night when I overheard him talking about me like I was palace furniture. Reliable, predictable, always there when needed. You heard the testimony about the conversation with Lady Krell? Yes. How did those words make you feel? Objection, Rendall says. Feelings are not material. Your Honor, Vel counters, the prosecution built their entire case on His Majesty's feelings. The defendant's emotional state is equally relevant. Overruled. Answer the question. Selene takes a breath. Like I finally understood the truth. I was not a partner. I was a resource. Something to be utilized and managed. The crown was never mine. The palace was never home. I was just useful staff who happened to share the king's bed. What did you do? I left. Just like that? Not just like that. It took years to reach that decision. Years of telling myself things would improve. Years of accepting less than I deserved because walking away seemed impossible. But that night, hearing Darius describe me with such casual certainty, I understood that staying would kill something essential in me. So you left to save yourself? I left because I finally valued myself enough to refuse a life that demanded I be smaller than I am. Vel nods and shifts topics. When you left, what did you take? My father's medical ledgers? My personal surgical instruments? Clothing I purchased before the marriage? Money I earned before bonding? Nothing that belonged to the crown. The prosecution claims those medical instruments were crown property. They claim incorrectly. I have bills of sale proving I purchased every tool before ever entering the palace. Would the tribunal like to see them? Please present them. Selene produces documents from Vel's cases. Receipts, invoices, proof of purchase for every disputed item. Thorn examines them carefully. These appear legitimate. Advocate Rendall, does the Crown dispute these documents? Rendall flips through papers. We were not aware they existed. Because you assumed ownership without verification, Vel says. You assumed that everything my client touched became Crown property. That assumption is the foundation of your entire case. Let us move on, Corvain says. Ms. Vareth, you are currently practicing medicine in Ashmore Settlement? Yes. Under what authority? My guild certification. Same authority I held before bonding, throughout my time as queen, and after departure. The prosecution claims you need special authorization as a former royal physician. The prosecution is inventing law that does not exist. My guild standing is independent of crown employment. Leaving the palace does not revoke professional credentials any more than leaving a hospital would. Vel stands. Your Honors, with the tribunal's permission, I would like to present evidence of my client's current practice. Proceed. Vel opens the third leather case and begins stacking ledgers on the evidence table. 3 months of patient records from Ashmore Settlement. Every diagnosis documented, every treatment logged, every outcome tracked. 217 patients treated, 93 full recoveries, 74 partial recoveries requiring ongoing care, 41 cases referred to specialists in Crosshaven, 9 deaths from conditions that were terminal on arrival. He spreads the ledgers across the table. This is not a legal practice. This is textbook professional medicine. My client maintains better records than most palace physicians. She charges based on ability to pay. She refers complex cases appropriately. She follows guild protocols precisely. If this is criminal activity, then every independent healer in the Dominion is a criminal. Magistrate Valdus picks up one of the ledgers and reads, "These are remarkably detailed. My father taught me that truth survives when someone writes it down," Selene says. "So I write everything down." Valdus continues reading. "You delivered 2 babies during a midwife's illness?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Outcome?" "Both healthy. Mother and children doing well. You treated a crushed hand injury?" "Minor named Garrett Cross. Rockfall. 3 broken fingers, severe laceration. I set the bones, stitched the wound, monitored for infection. He retained full function." Valdus looks up. "This is impressive work." "It is my work," Selene says. "The same work I did at the palace. The same work I will continue doing regardless of what this tribunal decides. Because healing is not something the Crown grants permission for. It is what I am." The chamber is silent. Valdus sets down the ledger and looks at her fellow judges. "I would like to call a brief recess to review these documents." Corvain nods. 30 minutes. The tribunal rises and withdraws. Selene returns to the antechamber with Vel. "How did I do?" "Perfectly. You gave them everything they needed to rule in your favor. Now we wait and see if they have the courage to do it." 37 minutes later, the tribunal returns. Everyone rises. The judges sit. Corvain speaks. "This tribunal has reviewed all evidence and testimony. We are prepared to render judgment." Selene feels her heart hammering. "On the charge of desertion of royal duty, we find the defendant not guilty. The evidence demonstrates that bonding creates social obligations but not legal servitude. The defendant exercised her right to end a personal relationship. Rendall stands. Your Honor, this sets dangerous precedent." "Sit down, advocate," Thorne snaps. "On the charge of theft of crown property, we find the defendant not guilty. The documentation proves all disputed items belong to the defendant personally." Corvain continues, looking deeply unhappy. "On the charge of unlawful medical practice, we find the defendant not guilty. Her guild certification is valid and independent of crown employment." He strikes the judgment bell. "All charges dismissed. The defendant is free to continue her practice in Ashmore without legal impediment. This tribunal further orders that the defendant's independent professional standing be entered into permanent Dominion record to prevent future challenges to her credentials." The chamber erupts. Nobles whispering, healers in the gallery standing and applauding. Rendall gathering papers with the rigid movements of a man who just lost catastrophically. And Darius sitting absolutely still at the prosecution table, staring at nothing. Selene stands on legs that barely support her weight. She won. Not because the king showed mercy, but because truth, when documented and defended, can defeat even royal authority. Vel touches her arm. "Congratulations. You just changed Dominion law. I just wanted my freedom. You got that too." Selene walks out of Frostspire Hall into winter twilight. The air tastes like snow and liberation. She stands on the tribunal steps and breathes deeply for the first time in months. Free. Legally. Permanently. No one can use law against her now. No one can claim she stole what was always hers. No one can force her back into a life that demanded she be less than she is. Behind her, the tribunal doors open. Darius emerges alone. No guards, no advisors. Just a man who wagered everything on control and lost. They stand 15 feet apart on the steps. Selene waits. Darius looks at her with an expression she cannot read. Then he speaks. "I understood." "What?" "When I filed the charges, my mother visited me the night before. She warned me what I was doing. She told me I was using law to punish rejection. I understood her completely, and I filed the charges anyway." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know." I was not confused or misguided. I knew exactly what I was doing. I chose institutional power over personal honesty. I chose control over connection. And I lost everything that mattered as a result. Selene studies him, looking for lies, finding only exhaustion. "What do you want from me, Darius?" "Nothing. I want nothing. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I refused to see then. You were never mine to keep, and trying to force you to stay destroyed the only thing worth preserving. Which was? The possibility that someday, if I became worthy of it, you might choose to return. Selene feels something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. A predator can be feared, a king can be obeyed, but only truth can dismantle arrogance. Darius just told the truth. No defensiveness, no excuses, just brutal accuracy about his own failures. That means something, not everything, but something. I am returning to Ashmore tomorrow, Selene says. I have patients who need me. I know, I am not coming back to the palace. I know that too. Then what happens now? Darius looks at the darkening sky. I do not know, but I am resigning the throne. Already signed the documents. My brother will take the crown in spring. I cannot govern an empire when I failed so completely to govern myself. You are abdicating? I am choosing honesty over authority. Finally, he meets her gaze. If you will allow it, I would like to visit Ashmore sometime. Not to demand anything, just to see what you built, to understand the life I tried to destroy. Selene considers. Every instinct says no. Every memory warns against trusting a man who used law as a weapon. But something else whispers beneath the fear. People can change, not easily, not quickly, but genuinely if they are willing to face truth without flinching. Darius just faced truth, and it cost him everything. You can visit, Selene says, but you arrive as Darius Black River, not King Varen, no crown, no guards, no authority, just a man who wants to understand what he lost. Black River? You need a new name for a new life. Black River seems appropriate for someone starting over. Darius nods slowly. Black River. I can live with that. Selene turns to leave, then stops, looks back. Darius, one more thing. Yes? Visiting does not mean forgiveness. It means I am willing to see if change is real. Nothing more. I understand. Good. She walks down the steps into winter darkness. Behind her, Darius remains on the tribunal steps, watching her disappear into the city. A king undone by the woman he underestimated. A crown abandoned for the chance to become someone worthy of being chosen. And between them, the long road from ownership to partnership. A road that begins with a single truth. Some bonds cannot be commanded back into place. They can only be earned. One difficult conversation at a time. One honest moment after another. Until trust, that rarest of all currencies, becomes possible again. Not guaranteed, just possible. And possibility, Selene thinks as she walks toward the inn where Vel waits with celebration wine, is sometimes enough to begin with. The rest will reveal itself. Or it will not. Either way, she is free to choose, and that freedom, purchased through courage and defended with truth, is worth more than any crown ever offered. Selene returns to Ashmore 3 days after the tribunal with winter pressing hard against the northern territories. The settlement looks smaller than she remembers, more fragile, as if absence revealed truths that familiarity had concealed. The river runs black beneath ice forming along the banks. Smoke rises from chimneys in thin gray columns that disappear into low clouds. Everything feels temporary in a way it did not before. Mira meets her at the healing house door before Selene even dismounts. You won, the girl says. Elder Garen got word 2 days ago. The whole settlement knows. Selene slides down from her horse, every muscle protesting 3 days of hard riding. I won. So why do you look like you lost? Because winning and healing are not the same thing. Mira takes the horse's reins and leads it toward the stable while Selene enters the healing house. Everything is exactly as she left it. Shelves organized, records stacked, fire laid but not lit. The space holds the particular emptiness of a place waiting for its person to return and give it purpose again. She lights the fire and sits at her desk. Freedom tastes different than she expected. Not sweet, just different. Like medicine that cures the disease but leaves the patient weak from fighting. Her father used to say that survival costs something even when you win. The body remembers trauma long after the wound closes. Tissue scars, nerves misfire. Pain echoes in places that should have healed. Selene wonders what scars this fight carved into her. That night, she treats 4 patients, a child with winter cough, a woman with infected finger from a sewing needle, an old man whose joints ache so badly he cannot sleep, a fisherman with a gash across his forearm from a gutting knife. She works until midnight, updating records and compounding remedies for tomorrow's needs. Mira returns just as Selene is banking the fire. Can I ask you something? Always. The girl sits across from her, firelight making her young face look older than 13 years should allow. What happens now? With what? With the king. He resigned the throne. Everyone is talking about it. Some say he is coming here. Selene sets down the mortar she was cleaning. He asked permission to visit. I said yes. Why? Because people can change. Not often, not easily, but genuinely if they face truth without flinching. Do you believe he can change? I believe he wants to. Whether he can sustain that wanting is a different question. Are you going to take him back? Selene looks at the girl with the kind of tired honesty that only comes at the end of very long days. I have no idea. Right now I am focused on patience and records and keeping this practice running. Everything else can wait. Mira nods and stands to leave, then pauses at the door. For what it is worth, I think you should make him work for it. Make him prove change is not just performance. Wise counsel from someone so young. I learned from watching you. After Mira leaves, Selene sits alone with firelight and silence. Tomorrow she will return to the rhythms of healing. Tomorrow she will rebuild the routines that 3 weeks of travel disrupted. Tomorrow she will be the physician Ashmore needs. Tonight, she allows herself to simply be tired. The kind of tired that comes from fighting battles that should never have been necessary in the first place. She sleeps deeply and wakes to pounding on her door at dawn. Selene stumbles awake, pulls on her robe, and opens the door to find Elder Garen standing in fresh snow with an expression she has never seen on his face before. Fear. You need to come with me. Now. What happened? Just come. She pulls on boots and follows him through the settlement to the main hall. A crowd has gathered. 50 people, 60, more arriving, all of them staring at something posted on the hall door. Selene pushes through the crowd. An official proclamation nailed to the wood, royal seal, fresh ink. By order of King Regent Marcus Varen, sovereign of the Varen Dominion, all previous tribunal rulings issued under the authority of King Darius Varen are hereby suspended pending review for legitimacy concerns following his abdication. All persons who benefited from rulings issued in the final month of the previous sovereign's reign are ordered to surrender themselves to Crown custody for re-evaluation of their cases. Failure to comply will result in immediate warrant and forcible retrieval. This order supersedes all prior legal determinations and carries the full authority of the regent's emergency powers during transitional governance. Selene reads it 3 times. Her hands start shaking. No, this is not possible. Darius abdicated. His brother took the throne. But Marcus was always the cautious one, the careful one, the one who valued stability over everything else. And stability, in Marcus's mind, apparently means erasing everything Darius did in his final days as king, including setting Selene free. Elder Garen stands beside her. This is horseshit, he says quietly. Political horseshit designed to undo what the tribunal decided. Can they do this? Garen's expression goes hard. They just did. Selene feels the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything she fought for, everything she won, everything she proved, all of it suspended by a single proclamation from a new king who sees her freedom as collateral damage in consolidating power. This is what happens when regime change occurs. Old decisions become inconvenient. Old victories get reframed as problems needing correction. And people, human people with lives and practices and patients who need them, become variables in political equations. When do I have to surrender? Selene asks. Garen points to the bottom of the proclamation. 30 days. Then the warrant goes active. 30 days, 4 weeks. 1 month to prepare for the possibility that everything she built gets destroyed again. Selene walks back to the healing house in snow that falls heavier now, covering Ashmore in white silence. She enters and sits at her desk and stares at her father's ledgers. All that documentation, all that proof, all that evidence that she was exactly what she claimed to be. Meaningless if the new king decides law is whatever serves his political convenience. She spends the day treating patients and pretending everything is fine. But everyone knows. The settlement talks. Word spreads. The healer who won at tribunal is about to lose everything anyway because power changes hands and new hands rewrite old rules. That night, Mira appears at the healing house with tears in her eyes. They cannot do this. You won. The tribunal ruled. They cannot just undo it. They can, Selene says quietly. And they are. So what do you do? I do not know yet. The next week passes in a fog of waiting. Selene treats patients, updates records, compounds remedies, goes through all the motions of a functioning practice while uncertainty eats at the edges of every decision. Should she take new patients knowing she might not be here to follow up? Should she train Mira in advanced techniques the girl might never get to use? Should she pack her belongings now or wait to see if some miracle prevents the inevitable? On the 8th day, a rider arrives from the south. Not a royal courier. A private messenger carrying a sealed letter addressed to Selene Vareth. She breaks the seal. The handwriting is immediately recognizable. Darius. Selene, I learned of Marcus's proclamation 3 days ago. I am told you have 30 days before the warrant activates. I want you to know I am fighting this. I have sent formal protests to the Regent's Council. I have contacted every ally I still have in the capital. I am doing everything in my power to prevent this injustice. But I need to be honest with you about something I learned yesterday. Marcus did not issue this proclamation alone. He had support from the High Council, specifically from Corvain, who argued that allowing former queens to practice independently sets dangerous precedent for royal authority. This is not just political housekeeping. This is targeted erasure. They are coming for you specifically because your victory threatens the entire system of crown control over bonded partners. I am so sorry. I created this situation by filing the original charges. Now Marcus is using the chaos of my abdication to finish what I started. If there's anything I can do, tell me. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Darius Selene sets down the letter and feels something cold settle into her chest. Corvain, the judge who voted against her despite evidence, the man who serves crown authority above all else. He is the architect of this new attack, and he has the new king's support. That night, Selene writes a response. Darius, thank you for the warning. I suspected Corvain, but confirmation helps. I need you to understand something. I do not blame you for this. You filed charges. I defended myself. I won. What Marcus is doing now is his choice, not your fault. But I do need information. How strong is Corvain's influence with Marcus? Can he be countered? Are there council members who might oppose this proclamation if given reason? I have 30 days. I intend to use them. Selene. She sends the letter south and returns to the only work that makes sense. Healing. Because if she only has weeks left before Crown forces arrive to drag her back to the capital for retrial, she will spend those weeks doing what she came here to do, helping people who need help. The days blur together, 14 days left, 12, 10. Selene treats frostbite and winter fever and injuries that come from people working too hard in conditions that are too cold. She trains Mira in wound closure and fever management and the 100 small skills that might keep the settlement alive if Selene gets taken. She updates her records with obsessive detail because if they come for her, she wants evidence of every patient, every treatment, every outcome. Truth survives when someone writes it down, even if the people reading it do not care about truth. On day 23, another letter arrives from Darius. Selene, bad news. I met with 3 council members who might have opposed the proclamation. All 3 refused to help. Corvain has convinced them that overturning Marcus's first major decision would undermine the new king's authority. Your freedom is being sacrificed for political stability. I have one remaining option, but it is drastic, and I will not pursue it without your permission. I can return to the capital and publicly challenge Marcus for the throne. Force a leadership contest. If I win, I reinstate the tribunal ruling immediately. But this carries enormous risk. Civil conflict, potential violence, destabilization of the entire dominion during winter when the eastern borders are already unstable. I will do it if you ask, but I need to know you understand what it would cost. Tell me what you want. Darius Selene reads the letter 4 times. Darius is offering to start a civil war to save her, to challenge his own brother for the crown because Marcus is using that crown to undo her freedom. It is the most dramatic gesture imaginable. It is also completely insane. Thousands could die. The Dominion could fracture. Border territories might see civil conflict as opportunity for secession. Everything Darius spent 20 years building could collapse. all to reverse one proclamation affecting one person. Selene sits at her desk holding the letter and feels the weight of impossible choice. Let Darius fight for her and risk catastrophic violence, or surrender herself and hope the new tribunal is less corrupt than the last. Neither option guarantees anything. Both options cost more than she wants to pay. She writes back, Darius, do not challenge Marcus. The risk is too high. Too many people would suffer for my personal freedom. I will surrender on day 30 as required. I will face the new tribunal. I will defend myself again. Maybe this time the evidence will be enough. If it is not, at least I will know I did not cause civil war to avoid consequences. Thank you for offering. It means more than you know. But some prices are too high even for freedom. Selene. She sends the letter and spends the remaining days preparing. On day 28, she holds a final training session with Mira. The girl has learned faster than anyone Selene ever taught. Sharp mind, steady hands, the kind of focus that separates adequate healers from exceptional ones. You are not coming back, Mira says. Not as a question, as recognition. I do not know. Yes, you do. You are teaching me everything because you know they will not let you return. Selene stops pretending. Probably not. So what happens to the healing house? You take it. You're not ready for complex cases yet, but you know enough to handle common injuries and illnesses. For anything serious, refer to Crosshaven. Do not try to be me. Just be the best version of yourself. Mira's eyes fill with tears. This is not fair. No, it is not. Then why are you surrendering? Because the alternative is civil war, and I refuse to be responsible for that level of violence. Mira wipes her eyes angrily. I hate them. I hate everyone who is doing this to you. Selene pulls the girl into a hug, then use that anger to become the kind of healer they cannot touch. Build a practice so good, so essential, that no proclamation can erase it. That is how you fight back. Not with swords, with competence so undeniable it becomes permanent. The next morning, Selene packs. Not everything, just essentials. Medical instruments, her father's ledgers, clean clothes, the letter from Darius that proved he understood his failures. She leaves the healing house to Mira with detailed instructions on supplies, patient care, and when to admit limitations. Elder Garen comes to say goodbye. This is wrong, he says. You built something good here. You earned your place. I know. So why are you letting them take it? Because fighting would cost lives. I am not willing to spend. Garen shakes his head. You are a better person than I am. I would burn the capital down before surrendering. No, you would not. You would calculate cost versus benefit and make the hard choice, same as I am doing. He hands her a leather pouch. 200 gold from the settlement, in case you need advocate fees again. I cannot take this. You can and you will. We take care of our own. You are ours. Selene takes the pouch because refusing would insult the gesture. On day 30, she rides south, alone. The journey takes 5 days. Winter grips the northern territories with brutal efficiency. Snow falls constantly. Wind cuts through layers of wool and leather, the kind of cold that makes breathing hurt. Selene arrives at Frostspire Hall on the 6th day and surrenders herself to Crown custody as required. She is placed in a holding chamber. Not a cell. Just a windowless room with a bed and a basin and a guard outside the door. She waits. 3 days pass. No tribunal date announced. No charges filed. No advocate permitted. Just waiting. On the 4th day, the door opens. Not a guard. High Elder Corvain. He enters alone and sits across from her with the satisfied expression of a man who has maneuvered his opponent into checkmate. Ms. Vareth. How unfortunate to see you in these circumstances. Selene says nothing. Corvain smiles. I imagine you are confused, wondering why the tribunal has not convened, wondering what charges you will face. I assume you will enlighten me. No charges, Corvain says. This is not a trial. This is an opportunity. Selene's stomach clenches, because she suddenly understands. This was never about law. This was always about leverage. Corvain leans forward. Here is what will happen. You will sign a document acknowledging that your previous tribunal ruling was issued in error. that you accept the necessity of crown oversight for all former royal physicians, that you voluntarily surrender your independent practice rights. And if I refuse, then you remain in this room indefinitely. No trial, no tribunal, just administrative detention while your case undergoes review. Review that could take months, years, however long necessary until you see reason. That is illegal detention. Corvain shrugs. Prove it. You are in crown custody during legitimate transitional governance. The regent has emergency powers. No court will question his authority to hold you while determining proper legal status. Selene feels the walls closing in. This is the nightmare scenario. Not trial, not judgment, just indefinite imprisonment justified by bureaucratic language and emergency powers that have no expiration date. They will keep her locked away until she breaks, until she signs whatever document they want, until she surrenders not just her freedom, but her dignity. You want me to admit I was wrong, Selene says slowly. You want public acknowledgement that the crown can override tribunal decisions, that no victory against royal authority is ever actually final. Now you understand, Corvain says. This is not about you personally. This is about ensuring everyone knows that defying the throne has consequences. That even when you win in court, you lose in practice. And if I sign, you are free to return to Ashmore. Practice medicine under crown-approved restrictions. Live your quiet life. We leave you alone. What restrictions? Monthly reports to crown physicians. Annual review of your patient records. Mandatory crown certification renewal every 2 years. Nothing onerous, just enough oversight to remind you who actually controls your profession. Selene looks at this man who represents everything corrupt about power, the willingness to use law as a weapon, the casual cruelty of bureaucratic torture, the absolute certainty that might makes right. How long do I have to decide? Corvain stands. As long as you need, we are very patient. Take a week, take a month, take a year. We are comfortable waiting. He walks to the door, then pauses. One more thing. Your former mate sent multiple requests to visit you, all denied, just so you know he tried. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand how completely isolated you are. No advocate, no visitors, no one coming to save you, just you and this room and the choice you need to make. He leaves. The lock clicks. Selene sits alone in the windowless silence and feels the full weight of her situation settle around her. They are not going to try her. They are going to break her, slowly, methodically, using time and isolation and the grinding pressure of uncertainty. This is how institutional power destroys resistance. Not through dramatic confrontation, but through bureaucratic suffocation. Keep someone locked away. Deny them legal recourse. Offer one path to freedom that requires absolute surrender. Wait until desperation does what force never could. Selene lies on the narrow bed and stares at the ceiling. Her father's voice echoes through memory. Sometimes survival requires bending, not breaking, bending. But how far can she bend before she becomes someone she does not recognize? How much can she surrender and still call herself free? The questions circle through her mind without answers. Days pass. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3. No windows mean no sense of time. Just the rhythm of meals delivered through a slot in the door. The sound of guards changing shifts. The particular silence of stone walls that absorb sound and give nothing back. Selene exercises. Meditates. Reviews medical knowledge in her head to keep her mind sharp. But isolation works on the mind like water on stone. Slowly, invisibly. Eroding foundations until one day the entire structure collapses. On day 22 of detention, Corvain returns. Have you made your decision? Selene sits up. I want to speak with an advocate first. No advocates. This is administrative review, not legal proceeding. Then I want to speak with King Regent Marcus. His Majesty does not involve himself in administrative matters. Then I speak with no one and sign nothing. Corvain sighs. Ms. Vareth, you are making this harder than necessary. Sign the document. Return to your practice. Live your life. This stubbornness serves no purpose. It serves my dignity. Dignity is expensive in your position. Can you afford it? The question hangs between them. Can she? How long can she maintain defiance before isolation breaks something essential? Corvain leaves the document on the table. Read it. Consider carefully. I will return in 1 week. After he leaves, Selene reads the surrender document. 3 pages of legal language that boils down to simple truth. The crown wins. She loses. Accept permanent oversight or remain in detention forever. She sets it aside and returns to staring at the ceiling. That night, lying in the dark, Selene reaches the edge of her endurance. Not dramatic collapse, just the quiet recognition that she cannot sustain this indefinitely. They have time. She does not. They have comfort. She does not. They have options. She does not. Eventually, everyone breaks. The only question is what breaks first, your resolve or your sanity? Selene thinks about Ashmore, about Mira learning to close wounds, about patients who need medicine and care, about the healing house sitting empty while she rots in a stone room because she refused to bend. Pride is expensive. Dignity costs more than she thought, and survival sometimes demands surrender. She sleeps poorly and wakes to a sound she has not heard in 22 days. The door unlocking, but not Corvain. Darius. He enters the holding chamber wearing plain clothes instead of royal regalia. No crown, no armor. Just a man who looks like he has not slept properly in weeks. The guard closes the door behind him but does not lock it. "How did you get in here?" Selene asks. "I challenged Marcus." "You what?" "I challenged him for the throne. Formal leadership contest. Single combat. Winner takes sovereignty. We fought yesterday. I won." Selene stares. "You started a civil war. I started a duel. Marcus yielded before death. No civil war, just regime change. You are king again. As of yesterday morning. First act, releasing you from illegal detention. Second act, reinstating the original tribunal ruling. Third act, issuing a royal decree that no former tribunal decision can be overturned without new evidence and full hearing. Why? Because you were willing to rot in detention rather than surrender your principles. That kind of integrity deserves protection, not punishment." Selene feels something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, releasing. All the pressure, all the fear, all the grinding uncertainty of 22 days in isolation. She starts crying. Not delicate tears. Ugly, shaking sobs that come from a place deeper than thought. Darius crosses the room and pulls her into a hug. She fights it for maybe 3 seconds, then gives up and lets herself be held by the man who created this nightmare and then burned his own life down to end it. They stand there for several minutes while Selene cries herself empty. Finally, she pulls back. What happens to Corvain? Exiled, permanently. He is on a ship to the western colonies as we speak. And Marcus? Abdicated formally, retired to family estates. He will live comfortably but never hold power again. Selene wipes her eyes. "You did not have to do this." "Yes, I did. Because watching you suffer for a freedom I tried to destroy was not something I could live with. So you challenged your brother to single combat. It seemed less destructive than civil war." Despite everything, Selene almost laughs. "You are insane." "Probably. But I am insane in ways that finally serve something other than my own ego." He hands her a document. Royal decree. Your tribunal ruling is permanent law. No future king can overturn it. Your right to practice independently is protected forever. Selene takes the document with shaking hands. This is what she fought for. What she nearly broke defending. Permanent protection. Institutional change. Freedom that outlasts any single ruler's whim. "Thank you," she says quietly. "Do not thank me. I am just correcting mistakes I should never have made. Still, thank you." They stand in the windowless room surrounded by the wreckage of institutional cruelty and the fragile beginning of something that might eventually become trust. "What happens now?" Selene asks. "Now you return to Ashmore. Resume your practice. Live the life you built. And you? I govern. Try to be the kind of king who protects freedom instead of crushing it. Learn to separate authority from ownership. Will you still visit? If you still want me to." Selene considers. "Yes, but not as king, as Darius Black River, the man trying to become worthy of being chosen instead of obeyed. I can do that. Then visit. But understand something. This does not erase what you did. It does not undo the harm. It just means I am willing to see if change is real instead of performance. That is more than I deserve. Probably. But I'm trying to be generous instead of just." Darius smiles slightly. Generous might be harder than just. Much harder. They leave the holding chamber together. Outside, winter sunlight cuts through clouds in shafts of cold brilliance. Selene breathes free air for the first time in 22 days and feels her lungs expand with the kind of relief that borders on pain. She is free. Not because someone granted mercy, but because institutional change, purchased through suffering and defended with blood, finally made freedom permanent. The cost was higher than she wanted to pay, the victory smaller than she hoped to win. But it is victory nonetheless. And sometimes, victory is just survival with documentation. Evidence that you refuse to break even when breaking would have been easier. Proof that some principles matter more than comfort, and the quiet knowledge that changing systems requires changing the people who run them, one difficult conversation at a time, until transformation becomes permanent instead of temporary. Selene rides north 3 days later, back to Ashmore, back to patience and records and the healing house that waited for her return. Behind her, Darius remains in the capital, learning to govern with humility instead of assumption. Between them stretches the long road from ownership to partnership, a road that begins with truth and continues through choice, and only arrives at trust after countless proofs that change is real. Not guaranteed, just possible. And possibility, Selene thinks as Ashmore appears through winter fog, is enough to build on. The rest will reveal itself. One day at a time, one choice at a time, until freedom becomes not just legal status, but lived reality, permanent, protected, and entirely her own. Selene has been back in Ashmore for 6 weeks when the first Tuesday arrives. Not announced, not arranged through formal channels. Just Darius appearing at the healing house door on a cold morning with snow falling in thick sheets and no guards anywhere in sight. He wears plain traveling clothes, no crown, no ceremonial anything, just a man standing in the snow looking uncertain for perhaps the first time in his adult life. Selene opens the door and they look at each other for several seconds. "I said I would visit," Darius says. "So you did. Can I come in?" She steps aside. He enters, and the space immediately feels smaller. Not because of his physical size, but because of the weight he carries. Authority compressed into civilian clothes, power trying to pretend it does not exist. Mira is grinding herbs at the workbench. She looks up, and her eyes go cold. "You," she says. "Me," Darius agrees. "You are the one who filed charges against her." "I am." "You used law like a weapon because she left you." "I did." Mira sets down her mortar with deliberate precision. "Then you can leave now. We do not need you here." Darius looks at Selene. "Your apprentice has good instincts." "The best," Selene says. "Mira, take the morning records to Elder Garen. He wanted to review supply requests. But he is... I know who he is. Go anyway." Mira grabs the ledgers and walks out, making sure to slam the door hard enough to rattle the windows. After she leaves, silence settles. Darius looks around the healing house with the careful attention of someone trying to understand a foreign country. "You built this yourself?" "Rebuilt it. The structure was here. Everything else is mine. It is impressive. It is functional, more than functional. It is professional, organized, the kind of practice that would earn respect in any city." Selene crosses her arms. "Why are you here, Darius?" "Because I said I would come. Because I want to understand what I tried to destroy. Because I am attempting to be worthy of a second chance I probably do not deserve. That is a lot of because. I have a lot to make up for." Selene gestures to the bench. "Sit. I have tea." They sit across from each other like strangers navigating unfamiliar territory. Selene pours tea that smells like pine in winter. They drink in silence for a moment. Then Darius speaks. "Tell me about your patients." "Why?" "Because I want to understand what this life looks like. What you chose over the palace." So Selene tells him. About the fisherman with the crushed hand who now has full function. About the child with winter fever who survived because willow bark and careful monitoring caught the infection before it spread. About the pregnant woman terrified of childbirth who needed reassurance more than medicine. She tells him about the work, the real work. The kind that happens when healing is not performance for nobility, but essential service for people who have no other options. Darius listens without interrupting. When she finishes, he sets down his tea. "You're happier here than you ever were at the palace." Not a question. Recognition. Much happier. Why? Because here I am necessary instead of decorative. Here my value comes from what I can do, not who I am bonded to. Here I fail or succeed based on my own merit. That must be terrifying. It is the best kind of terrifying. Darius nods slowly. I think I am starting to understand what you tried to tell me during the tribunal. That being valued is not the same as being seen. That providing resources is not the same as providing connection. You are learning, very slowly. But yes, they talk for another hour about Ashmore, about the challenges of frontier medicine, about Mira's fierce protectiveness and impressive skill. Then Darius stands. I should go. You have patience. Probably. Can I come back next week? Why? Because one conversation is not enough to understand 11 years of mistakes. Because I'm trying to learn who you actually are instead of who I needed you to be. Because I want to earn the right to be part of your life instead of assuming I own it. Selene considers. Come back next Tuesday. Same time. We will talk more. Just talk? Just talk. For now, I can do that. He leaves. Selene sits alone with her tea and feels something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the first fragile possibility that maybe, eventually, trust might be reconstructible. The Tuesdays become routine. Each week, Darius arrives. They talk. He asks questions. She answers honestly. He tells her about governance challenges and learning to seek counsel instead of issuing commands. She tells him about difficult cases and the satisfaction of watching Mira's skills develop. Slowly, conversation by conversation, they begin to know each other, not as king and queen, as people. On the 8th Tuesday, Darius arrives looking troubled. What is wrong? Selene asks. Border conflict. The eastern provinces are pushing territorial claims again. My advisors want military response. I am trying to negotiate, but the council thinks I am being weak. What do you think? I think war costs lives, and most territorial disputes can be resolved through trade agreements and face-saving compromises. But my advisors say that makes me sound like Marcus, cautious to the point of ineffective. So you are caught between the king you were and the king you are trying to become. Exactly. What would make the conflict worth fighting? Darius looks surprised. What? You said most disputes can be negotiated, which implies some cannot. What makes a conflict worth bloodshed? When the alternative costs more lives than fighting would. When waiting means watching people suffer that military intervention could protect. When negotiation becomes cover for aggression that will only escalate. Then determine which situation you face. Is the East actually threatening lives or just testing boundaries? Darius goes quiet. Then he smiles slightly. You just gave me better strategic counsel than my entire war council. I just asked a question, the right question. That is harder than most answers. He leaves to return to the capital and address the border situation with new clarity. Selene watches him ride south and feels the distance between them shrinking. Not gone, but smaller. On Tuesday 14, something changes. Darius arrives and helps her reorganize the medicine shelves without being asked. They work in comfortable silence for an hour, sorting herbs and updating inventory. At one point, Darius reaches for the same jar Selene does, and their hands touch. Neither pulls away immediately. The moment stretches. Then Selene withdraws her hand and returns to cataloging. But something shifted. Some barrier thinned. That night, lying in bed, Selene admits something she has been avoiding for weeks. She is starting to feel things she thought were dead. Not love. Not yet. But attraction, interest. The dangerous possibility that the man Darius is becoming might be worth choosing instead of enduring. The thought terrifies her, because choosing him again means making herself vulnerable to someone who already destroyed her once. On Tuesday 17, Mira confronts Selene directly. You like him. I am learning to tolerate him. You like him. I can tell. You smile when he arrives, you ask about his week. You touch your hair before answering his questions. Selene sets down the medical text she was pretending to read. What is your point? My point is, be careful. He hurt you once. People do not change as much as they pretend. Some people do change. When the cost of staying the same becomes unbearable. And you think he changed? I think he is changing. Present tense. Ongoing process. Not complete. Mira crosses her arms. If he hurts you again, I will poison him. Just so we are clear. Despite everything, Selene laughs. Noted. But hold off on the poisoning for now. For now. On Tuesday 21, disaster arrives. Darius appears at the healing house, not in traveling clothes, but in full armor. Blood streaks his face. His left arm hangs wrong. Behind him, 3 injured soldiers lean against their horses. We were ambushed, Darius says. 20 miles south. Eastern Province raiders. They are getting bolder. Selene shifts immediately into physician mode. Get them inside. Mira, boil water. I need clean bandages and the surgical kit. The next 4 hours are chaos. One soldier has an arrow through his shoulder. Selene removes it carefully, packs the wound, stitches the entry and exit. He will live, but the arm needs monitoring for infection. Another has a deep gash across his ribs. Selene closes it with 17 stitches and wraps his entire torso. The third has a broken leg. Selene sets it with splints and opium for pain. Then she turns to Darius. Sit. I am fine. Your arm is dislocated. Sit. He sits. Selene examines the shoulder. Clean dislocation, no fracture. Reducible, but painful. This is going to hurt, she warns. I have had worse. Selene braces his torso and pulls the arm with sudden, precise force. The shoulder relocates with an audible pop. Darius goes white but does not make a sound. She wraps it in a sling and hands him willow bark tea. Drink. Then tell me what happened. Darius drinks and then explains. Eastern Province raiders hit a merchant caravan. We responded. They scattered but regrouped and ambushed us on the return. 20 attackers against 6 of us. We fought clear but barely. Did you kill any of them? 3. Maybe 4. Hard to tell in the chaos. Selene processes this. The border situation is not improving. It is getting worse. They are testing whether I will actually fight or just negotiate forever. And now you have fought. Now I have fought, which means escalation is coming. He looks at her with something raw in his expression. I need to return to the capital tomorrow. Organize proper military response. But I wanted you to know what is happening, in case things get worse. Worse how? The eastern provinces might push for actual invasion. If they do, I am going to have to defend the border. Which means war. Selene sits beside him. War you tried to avoid. War I tried to negotiate away. But sometimes negotiation is not enough. The question you asked me weeks ago, is this worth fighting? Darius nods. They're killing merchants now, civilians. If I do not respond, more people die. The alternative costs more lives than fighting would. Then you fight. I fight. They sit in silence while the wounded soldiers sleep and Mira cleans surgical instruments. Finally, Darius speaks again. If I do not come back, you will come back. Selene, you will come back because you are finally becoming someone worth choosing, and I refuse to lose that possibility to Eastern Province raiders who do not know when to stop pushing. The words hang between them. An admission, a vulnerability, a door opening that Selene swore would stay closed. Darius looks at her with an expression she has never seen before. Not ownership. Wonder. You would choose me? After everything? I did not say that. I said I refuse to lose the possibility. There is a difference. What difference? Choice requires time, evidence, proof that change is permanent instead of temporary. You are giving me that proof. Slowly, but genuinely. And I'm starting to believe it might be real. Might be? Might be. I am not making promises, just acknowledging possibilities. Darius reaches out with his good arm and touches her face, very gently, like she is something breakable and precious. I will come back, he says, because finally I have something worth coming back for that is not just duty or obligation or political necessity. I have you, and I am not losing that again. Then win your war. Protect your people. Be the king who defends instead of conquers, and when you come back, we will see what comes next. That is all I am asking for. He leans forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. She does not pull away. Their lips meet in a kiss that tastes like blood and willow bark and the dangerous promise of second chances. When they part, Selene rests her forehead against his. Do not die. I will do my absolute best. That is not good enough. Do not die. Yes, ma'am. He leaves before dawn. 3 soldiers still recovering but stable. Darius riding south toward a capital that needs its king to make impossible decisions about violence and protection and the terrible calculus of lives spent versus lives saved. Selene watches him disappear into pre-dawn darkness and feels fear settle into her bones. Because war is not surgery. You cannot control outcomes through skill and precision. You can only fight and hope the chaos favors you. 3 weeks pass. No word from the capital. Ashmore receives scattered reports from traveling merchants. The king mobilized the army, 10,000 soldiers marching east, the largest military deployment in 20 years. Border skirmishes escalating, casualties on both sides. Neither army gaining advantage. The eastern provinces called for reinforcements from their southern allies. Dominion forces digging in for prolonged conflict. Each report makes Selene's chest tighten. She treats patients and trains Mira and updates records. But her mind is always south. On week 4, a messenger arrives. Not from Darius, from the Capital War Council. Official notification. King Darius Vareth wounded in battle. Condition critical. Transported to capital for treatment. The words blur. Selene reads them 3 times. Critical, which means dying. Which means the man who finally learned to see her as human instead of possession might not survive to prove change was real. She packs her medical kit. Mira appears in the doorway. You're going. I am going. What about the settlement? You can handle common cases. Anything serious gets referred to Crosshaven. I am not ready. You are more ready than you think, and I do not have a choice. He is dying, and I am the best trauma surgeon in the Dominion. You love him. Not quite, but I might. And I refuse to lose that possibility without fighting for it. She rides south, 4 days of brutal travel. Arriving at Blackthorn Citadel, exhausted and terrified. Guards recognize her immediately. The physicians are with him now. 4th level. Royal Chambers. Selene runs. Upstairs, through corridors, past soldiers and servants and nobles who stare at the former queen returning in travel-stained clothes with a medical kit strapped to her back. She reaches the royal chambers and pushes through the door. 3 physicians surround the bed. On it, Darius lies unconscious and gray. A massive wound across his abdomen, poorly stitched, infection setting in, fever burning. The lead physician looks up. Your Majesty, we did not expect... Get out! But we are treating... You are killing him. That wound needs drainage and proper closure. You stitched over infected tissue. Get out now, or I will have you arrested for incompetence. The physicians scramble out. Selene approaches the bed and examines Darius with the cold precision of someone who cannot afford emotion right now. The wound is bad. Blades strike across the lower abdomen, penetrated muscle, possibly nicked intestine. The original field stitches trapped infection inside. He is dying because palace physicians do not understand trauma surgery. Selene sets up her instruments, calls for hot water and clean linens. Then she gets to work. First, remove the infected stitches. The wound opens and drains corruption that smells like death. Clean everything. Inspect for internal damage. Find the intestinal nick and repair it with sutures so fine they are barely visible. Close the muscle layer carefully. Finally, close the skin with the same precision she used on fishermen and miners. Dress the wound with golden seal and honey. Force medicine between his lips for fever and pain. Then wait. Hours pass. Selene sits beside the bed holding Darius's hand and willing him to live, because the universe cannot be cruel enough to let him change and then kill him before that change meant anything. Because she finally opened the door to possibility and she refuses to have it slammed shut by random violence. Because, damn it, she chose to fight for this, and she does not lose fights. Near dawn, Darius's eyes open. He looks at her, tries to speak. His voice comes out as whisper. You came. Of course I came. Why? Because you were dying, and I am the best surgeon available, and I refused to let you die when you finally became worth saving. He almost smiles. Romantic, accurate. Now shut up and rest. You lost a lot of blood, and your body needs to heal. Will I live? If you do what I tell you, then I will live. He closes his eyes, sleeps. Selene sits beside him and feels exhaustion crash over her like winter waves. She just saved the life of the man who tried to destroy hers. Not out of duty, not out of obligation, out of choice. Because he earned it by becoming someone different. Someone worthy of being fought for instead of fled from. And now the question becomes what happens next, when he recovers, when the war ends, when all the possibilities hanging between them have to resolve into actual decisions about actual futures. Selene does not know the answers, but for the first time in years, she wants to find out. Outside, dawn breaks over Blackthorn Citadel. Inside, a former queen sits beside a wounded king and guards the fragile possibility that love, the real kind built on truth instead of assumption, might actually be worth the terrifying risk of trying again. Darius survives the first night, then the second. By the third day, his fever breaks and color returns to skin that had gone the gray of approaching death. Selene remains at his bedside through all of it, monitoring vitals, changing dressings, forcing medicine and broth past lips that barely function. The palace physicians hover outside the door like carrion birds waiting for failure, but she ignores them completely. On the fourth morning, Darius wakes fully conscious for the first time since the surgery. He looks at Selene sitting in the chair beside his bed. She has not slept properly in days. Her clothes are stained with his blood. Her hair falls loose around her face. She looks exhausted and fierce and absolutely competent. "How bad was it?" he asks. His voice comes out rough from days of silence. "Bad enough that anyone else would have died. You nicked your intestine, and those idiots stitched over the infection. By the time I got here, you were maybe 12 hours from sepsis that would have killed you. But you fixed it. I fixed it. Why?" The question hangs between them. Selene could give easy answers. Professional duty. Basic humanity. The simple fact that she is a healer and he was dying. But they are past easy answers. "Because you finally became someone worth saving," she says. "Because you proved change was real by putting yourself at risk to protect people instead of control them. Because I refuse to live in a world where growth gets punished by random violence." Darius reaches for her hand with the arm that is not immobilized. She takes it. "I thought I was going to die without ever knowing if we could have worked." "You almost did. Would you have regretted it if I died?" Selene considers the question with the brutal honesty their relationship now requires. "Yes. Not because I love you, not yet, but because we were building towards something real and I wanted to see what it became." "Not yet," Darius repeats. "But maybe?" "Maybe. I will take maybe." He closes his eyes, exhausted from even that brief conversation. Selene sits holding his hand and thinks about the strange mathematics of second chances. How you can lose everything and rebuild from nothing if you are willing to face truth without flinching. How the strongest bonds are not the ones that never break, but the ones that break cleanly and get repaired with honesty instead of denial. Over the next 2 weeks, Darius heals. Slowly, with setbacks and complications, but steadily moving toward recovery under Selene's obsessive care. During those weeks, they talk, not the careful conversations of the Tuesdays in Ashmore, deeper discussions, harder questions, the kind of excavation work that relationship repair requires. One afternoon, while Selene changes his dressing, Darius asks the question she knew was coming. "What do we do when I recover? Do you return to Ashmore? Do I visit on Tuesdays forever? Do we actually try to rebuild what we had?" Selene finishes wrapping the wound before answering. "We cannot rebuild what we had. What we had was broken from the beginning. I was decoration pretending to be partner. You were authority pretending to be mate. Neither of us was honest about what we needed or who we were. So, what do we build instead? Something new. Something that starts with truth. Something where I keep my practice in Ashmore, and you keep your throne here, and we see each other when geography allows instead of obligation demands. You want to live separately? I want to maintain the life I built, the work that matters, the autonomy I fought for. But I also want to see if what we are building can coexist with that instead of consuming it. That sounds lonely. That sounds like two complete people choosing connection instead of two incomplete people needing completion." Darius absorbs this. Then he nods. "I can do that. I can be whole independently and still choose you. Prove it." "How?" "By getting well. By returning to governance. By showing me that the man you became during crisis persists during normalcy, by earning trust through pattern instead of promise. How long? As long as it takes. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have. Trust is not granted on schedule. It accumulates through evidence. Darius looks at her with something raw and real in his expression. I will earn it, however long it takes, whatever it costs. I will prove that change is permanent. Good. Now rest. You are still healing and talking exhausts you. He rests. Selene returns to reviewing medical texts and preparing remedies from the palace herb stores. Outside the window, Blackthorn Citadel functions around them, an empire continuing despite the wounded king at its center. Because institutions are larger than individuals, and power flows through structures that outlast any single person. That is both the terror and the freedom of leadership. You matter enormously and not at all. Your decisions shape thousands of lives, but the system continues without you. Legacy is not what you command, but what you enable others to build after you are gone. Darius is learning this lesson through forced stillness. Unable to govern from his sickbed, he watches his advisors make decisions. Some good, some questionable, all functional enough that the dominion does not collapse. He is not as essential as he believed, and that realization, painful as it is, creates space for something healthier than ego. On week 3 of recovery, Darius receives reports from the eastern border. The war ended 2 days after his injury, not through his leadership but through the field marshal's tactical brilliance. The eastern provinces sued for peace after a decisive engagement at Raven Ford, where Dominion forces destroyed their supply lines and forced retreat. Darius reads the reports with complex emotions, relief that the violence ended, pride in his military leadership, and something harder to name, the recognition that he was not the hero of this story. He got wounded. Others finished the job. Victory came through institutional competence, not individual greatness. You look troubled, Selene observes. I thought winning the war would feel different. How so? More triumphant, more personal. Instead, I am realizing I was one piece of a larger machine, important but not irreplaceable. That bothers you. It humbles me, which is probably healthy but uncomfortable. Selene sets down the medical text she was reading. Power teaches terrible lessons about importance. It convinces people they are the center of everything, that their presence is what makes systems function. But the truth is, most systems are resilient enough to survive almost any individual's absence. What matters is not whether you are essential, but whether you use your position to enable others or just glorify yourself. I spent 20 years glorifying myself, and now you are learning different. That is growth. It feels like diminishment. It is both. You diminish your ego to grow your capacity for connection. Some trades are worth making. Darius considers this while watching snow fall past the window. Then he speaks again. When I am well enough to travel, I want to visit Ashmore. See your practice properly. Meet your patients. Understand the life you chose over me. Why? Because I need to see what matters more than a crown. I need evidence that purpose exists outside institutional power. And I need to understand you in your actual context instead of the imagined version I built in my head. You can visit. But you come as Darius Black River, not as king inspecting territory, as a man trying to understand the woman he wants to choose. I can do that. We will see. 1 month after surgery, Darius is well enough to walk the Citadel halls without assistance. 2 months after, he returns to limited governance. 3 months after, his wound is healed to a scar he will carry forever. A permanent reminder of mortality and the thin line between alive and dead. During those months, Selene divides her time between Blackthorn and Ashmore. She spends 10 days at the capital ensuring Darius heals properly, then returns north for 10 days of practice work before cycling back. It is exhausting. It is also necessary, because she needs to prove to herself that she can maintain her autonomy while building connection. That choosing Darius does not mean surrendering Selene. Mira runs the Ashmore practice during Selene's absences with increasing competence. The girl is 17 now and frighteningly capable. She handles routine cases independently and knows when to refer complex situations to Selene's return. The settlement adapts to the new rhythm. The healer is sometimes here and sometimes gone, but always returns. Good enough. On the first day of spring, 6 months after the tribunal, Darius travels north to Ashmore. He arrives alone. No guards, no servants, no royal anything, just a man on horseback carrying a pack and wearing plain clothes. The settlement watches his arrival with wary curiosity. Some recognize him from descriptions. Others just see a stranger. He finds the healing house and knocks. Selene opens the door. They look at each other for a long moment. Then she steps aside. Welcome to my actual life. Darius enters and spends the next week living in Ashmore as Darius Black River. He stays at the settlement inn, eats common food, helps repair dock structures damaged by spring floods. Assists Elder Garen with legal records because organizational work translates across contexts. He watches Selene treat patients with the same obsessive precision she brought to palace infirmaries. He sees Mira's fierce protectiveness and impressive skill. He meets fishermen and miners and pregnant women and old people whose names he learns and whose stories he actually hears. One evening, while helping Selene organize herb shipments, he speaks quietly. I understand now why you chose this. Do you? Yes. Here you matter because of what you do, not who you are. Here your value is earned daily through competence. Here you are necessary instead of ornamental. That is part of it. What is the rest? Here I am whole, not performing wholeness for political purposes, but actually integrated. My skills serve clear purpose. My presence creates measurable good. I am not pretending to be useful. I am useful. Darius nods. I want that. Not here necessarily, but that kind of integration where who I am matches what I do. Then build it. Use your position to enable instead of control. Govern like you are serving people instead of commanding them. That is harder than it sounds. Everything worth doing is. They work in silence for a while, sorting herbs and updating inventory. Then Darius speaks again. I love you. The words land softly but clearly. Selene stops sorting and looks at him. Not as possession, he continues. Not as convenience. Not because you make my life easier or my throne more legitimate. I love you as the complex, difficult, fiercely competent woman you actually are. The one who walks away from empires that try to make her smaller. The one who fights legal battles alone and wins. The one who saves lives in frontier settlements because the work matters more than the recognition. Selene feels her throat tighten. I'm not ready to say that back yet. I know. But I am getting closer. I know that too. How do you know? Because you let me into your actual life. You let me see the work that matters. You let me meet your apprentice and your patients and understand what you built from nothing. You do not share that with people you do not care about. You are learning to read me. Finally. Only took me 11 years and complete destruction to figure it out. Despite everything, Selene smiles. Better late than never. That night, they sit by the river watching moonlight on black water. The settlement sleeps around them. Smoke rises from chimneys. Somewhere a dog barks. Normal sounds of normal life in a normal place where normal people do normal work. Nothing dramatic, nothing performative, just existence at a human scale. Darius reaches for Selene's hand. She lets him take it. What happens now? He asks. Now, we keep building. You return to the capital and govern with the integrity you learned through failure. I continue my practice and train Mira to take over eventually. We see each other when geography allows. We write letters. We have our Tuesdays, either here or there, depending on need. And we see if what we are building can sustain over time. No grand gestures? No dramatic reunification? No. Just steady accumulation of evidence that we work together without one of us disappearing into the other. How long until you know? Until I know what? Whether you can trust me enough to try again. Selene looks at the river running black beneath spring stars. Ask me in a year. After you have proven change persists through seasons and challenges and the boring maintenance work of daily governance. After I have proven I can maintain connection without losing autonomy. After we have both demonstrated that growth was real instead of temporary crisis response. A year is a long time. A lifetime of broken trust takes more than months to repair. Fair. They sit in silence for a while longer. Then Darius stands and helps Selene to her feet. They walk back toward the settlement together. Not touching, but close. Two people learning to navigate the space between independence and intimacy. At the healing house door, Darius stops. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for becoming worth saving. He leans in slowly. She meets him halfway. They kiss in spring darkness with river sounds and wood smoke and the quiet promise that maybe, eventually, trust might become certainty. When they part, Selene rests her hand against his chest. Go home tomorrow. Govern well. Be the king who learned from breaking. I will. And Darius? Yes? Come back in 2 weeks. I will be here. He smiles. Then I will be here in 2 weeks. The year that follows establishes pattern. Darius governs from Blackthorn with the hard-won wisdom that comes from facing mortality and emerging changed. He implements reforms that decentralize power. He builds advisory councils that include voices traditionally excluded from governance. He governs like someone who knows institutional authority is temporary and legacy is measured in systems that outlast individuals. Selene practices medicine in Ashmore with the same fierce competence she always brought to healing work. She trains Mira until the girl is ready for independent practice. She writes medical texts documenting frontier treatment methods. She builds a practice that will survive her eventual departure because continuity matters more than individual brilliance. They see each other twice monthly. Sometimes Darius travels north. Sometimes Selene travels south. Sometimes they meet in Crosshaven, halfway between their worlds. They write letters, long ones, honest ones, letters that document failures and successes and the slow accumulation of trust that survives because it is tested repeatedly and holds. The Dominion stabilizes. The eastern border remains quiet. Trade flourishes. People stop talking about the king who abdicated and then reclaimed his throne and start talking about the king who governs with unusual humility for someone so powerful. In Ashmore, people stop calling Selene the former queen and start calling her simply the healer, the best compliment she could receive. 1 year and 1 day after their conversation by the river, Darius returns to Ashmore. He arrives at the healing house in early evening. Selene is compounding remedies for tomorrow's patients when he knocks. She opens the door, and they look at each other with the kind of recognition that only comes from sustained exposure. A year, Darius says. A year, Selene confirms. Have I proven it? Have you proven what? That change is permanent, that I can sustain growth through boring normalcy as well as dramatic crisis, that I am worthy of being chosen instead of endured. Selene steps aside and lets him enter. She pours tea that smells like spring herbs and early flowers. They sit across from each other like they have dozens of times before. Then Selene speaks. You have proven you can govern with integrity. You have proven you can respect my autonomy. You have proven you can show up consistently without demanding I reshape my life around yours. You have proven change was real. So what does that mean? It means I choose you. Not because I need you. Not because crowns or duty or political advantage demand it. I choose you because you became someone worth choosing. Someone who sees me clearly and values what he sees. Someone who can be whole independently and still want connection. Darius sets down his tea. What does choosing look like? It looks like continued separation. Me here, you there, but with commitment instead of uncertainty, with partnership instead of possession, with the understanding that we build a life together while maintaining the individual lives that make us whole. No shared throne? No. But shared purpose, shared values, shared commitment to building something better than what we had before. I can live with that. Can you? Really? Can you be king in Blackthorn while your bonded mate practices medicine in a frontier settlement? Can you accept that our relationship is not your primary identity, but one important piece of a complex life? Yes. Because I finally understand that connection is not ownership, that love does not mean consuming, that the strongest partnerships are ones where both people are complete independently and choose each other anyway. Then we try, formally, intentionally, with the understanding that we are building something new instead of repairing something broken. Darius stands and crosses to where Selene sits. He kneels in front of her, not as king to subject, as man to woman, as equal to equal. Selene Vareth, will you bond with me again? Not because law requires it or politics demands it, but because you choose to. Selene looks at this man who destroyed her and then rebuilt himself from ruins. This man who learned humility through loss and integrity through failure. This man who proved that people can change if they face truth without flinching. Yes, she says. I choose you. Again, differently, better. They seal it with a kiss that tastes like tea and spring air and the hard-won certainty that comes from choosing freely instead of accepting inevitability. The bonding ceremony happens in Ashmore Settlement Hall 6 weeks later. Simple, small, 17 witnesses. Elder Garin presides because legal authority matters, but community matters more. Mira sits in the front row looking fierce and proud and ready to poison anyone who hurts her teacher ever again. Darius wears plain clothes. No crown, no armor, no royal regalia. Selene wears dark emerald that makes her look like forest and shadow and strength. They speak the old words with new understanding, promises to honor and support and see each other clearly, commitments to maintain individual integrity while building shared purpose, vows to choose each other daily instead of assuming permanence. When it is done, they are bonded, not as king and queen, as partners. That evening, while the settlement celebrates with food and music and the kind of joy that comes from witnessing people get it right the second time, Selene and Darius slip away to the healing house. They sit by the fire drinking wine and talking about logistics. I need to be in the capital 3 weeks per month, Darius says, and I need to be here at least 2 weeks per month, so we overlap 1 week and spend the rest writing letters and trusting each other. Darius nods. This is not what I imagined marriage looking like when I was young. What did you imagine? Constant togetherness, shared everything. The kind of union where 2 people become one. That sounds suffocating. It was. We tried it, nearly destroyed us both. So we do this instead. 2 whole people choosing connection without fusion. Exactly. It is a strange kind of partnership. Selene leans against him. It is our partnership, built for who we actually are instead of who we thought we should be. Later that night, there is a knock on the door. Selene opens it to find Mira holding a small package. For you, the girl says. Wedding gift. Selene opens it. Inside is a journal, leather-bound, beautiful craftsmanship. The first page has an inscription in Mira's careful script, for recording the truth, because truth survives when someone writes it down. Thank you for teaching me everything that matters. Love, Mira. Selene feels tears threaten. This is beautiful. You taught me that documentation matters, that recording what actually happens is more important than preserving comfortable fictions. So record this. The second chance, the rebuilt love, the proof that people can change. Selene hugs the girl fiercely. After Mira leaves, Selene shows Darius the journal. She is right, he says. This should be recorded. The failure and the recovery, the breaking and the repair. Because maybe someone else needs to know that falling apart is not the end if you are willing to face truth and rebuild honestly. So Selene writes, that night and many nights after, she documents the journey from palace to frontier to tribunal to war to healing to choice. She records the lessons learned about power and autonomy and the difference between being valued and being seen. She writes about the cost of change and the price of integrity and the strange mathematics of second chances. She creates a record that survives because someone wrote it down. Truth preserved in ink and careful script. Evidence that love, the real kind built on honesty instead of assumption, is possible if you are willing to destroy what does not work and build something better from the ruins. 5 years later, Selene sits in the Ashmore Healing House updating patient records while spring rain drums against the windows. Mira runs her own practice in Crosshaven now. Brilliant physician, fierce advocate, everything Selene hoped she would become. Darius governs from Blackthorn with the steady competence of someone who knows power is temporary, but impact can be permanent. They see each other twice monthly, write letters, build a partnership that works because it respects distance as much as connection. Selene's practice thrives. Her medical texts are used throughout the Dominion. Her methods influence a generation of frontier physicians. She is 43 years old and more herself than she has ever been. The door opens. Darius enters shaking rain from his cloak. He crosses to where she sits and kisses her. How is the capital? Exhausting. The trade negotiations with the Southern Territories are more complex than anticipated. Will you resolve them? Eventually. with patience and compromise and the painful work of finding mutually acceptable terms. Sounds familiar? He smiles. I learned from the best. That evening, they sit by the fire while rain continues outside. Two people who broke and rebuilt. Two people who learned that the strongest bonds are not the ones that never fracture, but the ones that fracture cleanly and get repaired with brutal honesty. Two people who proved that change is possible if you face truth without flinching. Do you ever regret it? Darius asks. Leaving the first time? All the pain that followed? Selene considers. No. Because that pain taught me to value myself, to demand being seen instead of settling for being useful, to understand that freedom is worth fighting for even when the cost is high. And now I have freedom and connection, autonomy and partnership, the life I built and the person I chose. Not perfect, but real. And real is better than any performance of perfection. Darius takes her hand. I am grateful you walked away, because it forced me to become someone worth choosing instead of someone who assumed ownership. And I am grateful you learned, because becoming the kind of person who can face failure and grow from it is rarer than most people imagine. They sit in comfortable silence while fire crackles and rain falls, and the healing house holds them in warmth earned through survival and choice and the slow accumulation of trust. Outside, Ashmore sleeps. The river runs black beneath spring rain. The empire continues its complex dance of power and governance and the endless negotiation between individual and institution. And in a healing house beside the northern river, two people who destroyed each other and then rebuilt themselves separately before choosing each other again prove that redemption is possible. Not easy, not guaranteed, but possible. If you are willing to surrender what does not work, if you are brave enough to face truth without denial, if you can value being whole more than being comfortable, if you understand that real love is not possession, but choice renewed daily through honesty and respect and the hard work of seeing each other clearly. The fire burns low. They bank it together and prepare for sleep. Tomorrow, Darius returns to the capital. Tomorrow, Selene sees patients and updates records and continues the work that matters. Tomorrow, they will be apart but connected, independent but bonded, whole people choosing partnership instead of incomplete people seeking completion. And that choice, made freely and maintained consciously, is the only foundation strong enough to support love that survives. This is not a fairy tale ending. This is something better. This is real people doing real work to build real connection that respects real complexity. This is proof that power can be challenged and systems can be changed and people can grow if the cost of staying the same becomes unbearable. This is evidence that walking away from situations that demand you be smaller than you are is not weakness, but the fiercest kind of strength. This is the story of a queen who chose herself and a king who learned from losing her, and two people who proved that second chances are possible when both parties are willing to become worthy of them. The healing house stands quiet in spring darkness. Inside, two people sleep. Outside, the world continues. And in the careful documentation sitting on Selene's desk, truth survives because someone wrote it down. Evidence that love, when built on honesty instead of assumption, can weather anything, even itself.